I'm just a crazy person with voices babbling in my head.
It's childlike.
Oh, how gross. This whole conversation is scuffed. My eye is actually twitching.
Just shut up and let Dave talk. He's trying to compliment you. Only under libertarianism can you have the bigotry that all of your God-given heart desires.
Andrew has fisted his cerebellum.
Unless you are scared. Greetings.
God grant me strength. Oh, so I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. That's fine.
I thought you put your hands up.
God grant me objective morality. Greetings, interlocutor Bloodsport participants. Welcome back to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I will be Patrick Smith. Co-hosting with me today is Christian. Welcome back, Christian. Today we're going to be doing another interesting thing. There was recently a debate between Andrew Wilson. Some of you may have heard of him. I don't know. He is a Christian nationalist debate
populist.
Excuse me. That's important. Christian populist. Okay. Debate bro. And I say that and I'm going to be honest with my positions, biases, and feelings on debate. And that's part of what this video is going to be about. He's a debate bro. He is into the blood sport. He is into putting on a show on YouTube for his audience. And he's good at it. He's not good at debate towards the ends of finding truth. He's good at debate tactics and debate, let's call it blood sport, which I don't consider to be debate. And we're going to talk about that. So there's two purposes. That's one of them. We're going to discuss the practice of debate, what it is, what it's for, how it is properly done, how it is improperly done. And the second goal is going to be actually critiquing, viewing, watching the debate between Andrew Wilson and Dave Smith as they discuss Christian populism versus libertarianism. Christian,
what?
How do you feel this went? How is your experience? We've both seen it. How is your experience of this, of watching this the first time?
It was amazing. One of the best debates I've ever seen. I think everyone should be. It's my one status take is that everyone should be compelled to watch this. How do I want it? You know what? I'll just say the world might be a better place if this debate didn't exist, and I don't say that lightly. It wasn't really a debate. Neither side represented themselves very well, even in the little debateness that there was going on. And like the very, very few decent things that were said were just like overwhelmingly outweighed by large piles of nothing, and sometimes worse than nothing, just like horrendously wrong things. And so, in saying this is with some distance on my first viewing. I'm actually kind of glad that I'm not going into this blind, because I was floored when I heard this for the first time. But we're here to dissect, analyze, and understand. And so we're going to come into this with that perspective. And when things are wrong, we'll say they're wrong, but we'll explain why we think they're wrong. We'll try to provide constructive criticism that could be used to prevent things like this happening in the future. And perhaps even more importantly than that, help you equip yourself with the tools that you need in order to better understand and engage in these kinds of conversations.
Yes. So if you're interested in watching a contentious debate and having us comment on it, we are going to get into the fine details of debate tactics. We're going to call out the fallacies. We're going to call out the nonsense, bullshit, rhetoric tactics. We are going to have a long discussion, likely, about libertarian foundational morality, because that's what Dave is attacked on, and in our humble opinion, kind of failed to defend it. So we're going to do so. So that's what this video is going to be. If that's your thing, stay tuned. If it's not your thing, hey, click off, wait for the next video. We got some cool interviews coming, possibly with the wife or other associate of Ian Freeman, who's still in prison for cryptocurrency, quote unquote crimes. We have some cool shows, some cool interviews coming up. But I just want you to be forewarned. That's what we're doing today. We're going to go hard. We're going to go deep on philosophy and debate tactics today. So
Hard and deep.
Hard, long, and deep. It will. Oh man. Okay. All right.
You can edit that out if you want.
Need that much of
Okay. All right. So here we go. Guy on the left, Andrew Wilson. Guy on the right, Dave Smith. You guys know that one. So I want to be honest with the audience, but I also just don't want to just put people on blast and talk crap on my YouTube channel. That's not really useful. To be honest, I've watched Andrew Wilson in previous debates with other people where he was probably going to be in the right against them. I agreed with his side more than his competitor, his interlocutor in the debate. But what we're watching today is tame compared to what I've seen from him in the past. And his past performances, Christian, I can show you one if you want to know what I mean, it just basically made me click off and stop following him and sort of ignore any future content out of him. And we're going to kind of see why today. It's a moderately strong reason why. So, what is a debate? What is the purpose of a debate? I think the reason why we argue with people is not to defeat the other person, not to make them feel bad, to not make ourselves feel good. Debates are for locating truth, finding truth, learning more true things, unlearning more false things. And when I debate with somebody, that's a shared goal. And if it's not a shared goal, if it's unilateral, then the debate becomes like, it's just junk food entertainment. And that's mostly what you're going to find when you see debates online. You're going to see two people being dickheads to each other, using rhetorical tricks to make it appear like they won, rather than partner with the other person in an effort, in a journey to get closer to knowing more true things and less false things. And that's what I think debates should be. I wrote a debate methodology called Tensor. I named it the Tensor debate method. I'll put a link in the description to it later. It's like a 2-page document that outlines a good, useful debate methodology for online discourse. I really wish people would use that more than what we're about to watch. When I say partners in finding truth, I mean both people need to have a desire to want to learn that they're wrong about whatever their positions are, and be open to that happening, and be grateful if it does happen, not backpedal and fog and sort of talk shit and prevaricate and everything we're about to see in this video from both sides, by the way. When it's seen as a competition, and Andrew would even, probably even be proud to say it's a form of blood sport. In fact, that's what they call their methodology of debate. They kind of call it blood sport, and they willingly decide to kind of be a dick and to, really get aggressive with their opponents. All of those things actively work against the goal of a debate, and what I think it is, which is to work together to locate truth. If you're playing rhetorical games, if you're interrupting the other person, if you're being a dickhead to get them emotional so they have a harder time presenting their case, then you are in danger of continuing to believe something's false just because you screwed with the other person's head sufficiently such that they can't make the case to show you how you're wrong. So you're fighting your own ability to learn that you're wrong about something when you behave like this. And so that is my plea and my appeal to everyone watching this today, to stop being supportive of this debate style. It's disingenuous if your goal is to find truth. If your goal is to watch gladiators in an arena for fun, okay. But don't think that one of them winning or losing or doing better or worse than the other person has any bearing on truth whatsoever. Rant over. You have anything else, Christian, before I hit play?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just briefly, maybe some of y'all have seen me in other debates that I've done over the years. And I don't even like really referring to those as debates because they very rarely are. Because I'm not, it's almost a weakness of mine in these kind of conversations that like my goal is not to be confrontational and to like find a sticking point of disagreement and just pound someone into the dirt over it. My goal is to be like, okay, let's understand, let's communicate our ideas, let's figure out where one of us is wrong. Maybe we don't actually disagree in the way we think we do. And my goal is to resolve the tension. And that is the exact opposite goal of these tactics. They exist to foment tension, to create tension in order to, what it does, what I'm trying to say is that what it does is it puts you in a position to where agreement is essentially not ever a possibility. That's a problem in a debate. It's not just a contest of two people and who disagrees the best. You should be able to come to a point of agreement at the end of a good, solid debate. If you have strong arguments, you should want to be presenting them in a way that the person wants to agree with you at the end of a debate. It's just as important. And you should, obviously, the reverse applies as well. You should be open enough to the other person's position and charitable enough to their views that you go into this expecting that your beliefs may change. Do they? Do they not? That's not really the point. The point is that you are keeping yourself open to the fact that they could. Now, in saying this, you will see very shortly why I have some very strong opinions about how this debate was handled. So I think that's all. That's all I want to see in a debate. So I want to see two people in good faith exchanging ideas, open-minded to one another's perspectives, with the goal of coming away with a better understanding of the world that we live in. That's all I want. We did not get that, but I'm poisoning the well slightly here. So
yeah, and two things that you brought up. Number one, think about candles in the dark. A lot of the people in this audience are familiar with the candles in the dark method for sort of waking people up to anarchism from Larkin Rose, right? attendcandles.com for if you haven't heard of it. It's a great seminar for how to talk to people about ideas that they disagree with. And nowhere in Candles in the Dark does it say be a effing dick to the other person. Nowhere in Candles in fact, it explicitly says don't interrupt the other person. It explicitly says, like, ask more questions. Take yourself and your position out of it and learn about the other person's position and let them think and answer. There's a reason. Thank you, son. I appreciate it. I just got a coffee delivery from a superhero, which is awesome.
Amazing.
No. Oh, boy. All right. Okay, so that was the first thing I wanted to say. There's a reason why Candles in the Dark says not to do all the stuff you're about to see, because the stuff you're about to see doesn't work, and Candles in the Dark stuff does. And the other one I forgot because my son walked in a cape. So maybe we'll get back to it later. Let's get started with this.
Introduction. So Andrew is the challenger. You get to go first. You have up to 7 minutes for your opening statement whenever you're ready.
Sure.
I really, really dislike Lincoln Douglas style debates. I just wanted to say that as well. Not that this is going to be one of them. They do like timed openings, which is fine. They do a discussion phase, which is fine. But never mind. I'll save my Lincoln Douglas rant for a Lincoln
Sure.
Douglas.
You guys can hear me okay?
Critique.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dave, for coming into tonight's debate. I appreciate it. I want to let you know the reason I'm having this debate with you is because I think I can bring you to the dark side of the force. And you're already halfway there. My hope is to convince you to get to the rest of the way there. Libertarianism is, in the end, a system which inevitably leads to degeneracy. The reason libertarians currently have a Skittles nominee for president is because the very ideology itself is corrupt. It starts with the very core idea on which all other ideas are based, which is self-ownership. I know this is a doctrine that Mr. Smith does believe because I have seen him reference it multiple times in multiple appearances, most recently on Reason TV in his case against open borders. It's a failing dogma because it opens up the ultimate can of worms. people really do own themselves, then we really can't engage with any voluntary actions they take with each other and stop them, overrule them, or force them not to do those actions. This is exactly why skittles in society exists. By this logic, we can't outlaw incest, prostitution. We can't outlaw gay marriage. We can't outlaw polygamy. We can't even outlaw unaliving yourself. All things which Christian ethics point to as absolutely immoral. Dave can't really say that they are, though. They have to be allowed if you own yourself, or it would be a violation of the self-ownership doctrine. It's nice and all that Mr. Smith has distanced himself from the failure that is the modern Libertarian Party, and I applaud him for doing it, but ultimately, the very reason he had to is because of this reason. It always leads to the absurd outcome of mass degeneracy. It has to. There's no way around it. Dave assumes, for reasons I don't understand, that his solution of non-promotion yet legalization somehow better than the alternative of the state utilizing authority to remove these moral plagues. I want the state busting up prostitution rings and pimps. I want them arresting incest practitioners, and I want them to arrest polygamists. I want them to use force to prevent unaliving of oneself. The anarcho-capitalist, in this case Dave, can't justify the state really doing any of those things. The Christian ethicist can, striking a key balance between what he would call totalitarianism and what are considered freedoms. For us, though, Mr. Smith has outlined a plan, one he often repeats. His plan is to have libertarians move into positions of governance in order to take control of key systems and then abolish them eventually, in hopes that we eventually get to some kind of anarcho-capitalist society over time. He says this because, quote, the perfect is the enemy of the good. This means, of course, that because a thing isn't perfect doesn't mean we shouldn't move to what's better, even if what's better isn't perfect. So that the audience knows, this is also the exact plan of socialists. They also want to seize government institutions, abolishing power over time, in order to end up with a stateless society, just like Dave wants. It's amusing to note that ultimately what both sides are really fighting over is the power of the state and the use of its force. It's hilarious to me that Christians have fallen for any libertarian dogma at all. We have every right to rule as much as the secularists, and the right to wield state power how we see fit to exercise our will, just as the libertarian Mr. Smith wants to do himself, and as the socialists want to do. Mr. Smith definitely can't argue we shouldn't, as if traditional Christians were in power, society would certainly be better than it is now. And, well, if it's not perfect, well, perfection is the enemy of the good. Christian ethics is a superior system of justification, starting points, which reject libertarian axioms, including that of self-ownership, on which the non-aggression principle must base itself. I'd like to see Dave demonstrate for us that self-ownership is true. I'm willing to be convinced, but thus far I most certainly am not. I'd like him to finally clarify his oughts and if incest ought be allowed, if it isn't reproductive, if homosexual marriage ought be allowed, if polygamous marriages ought be allowed, and if unaliving yourself ought be allowed. Anytime in the past I have seen Dave pushed on these ought claims, he's somewhat evasive and dodgy. And I think it's time to get clear positions and note what he actually does want in society, not as preferences go, but as his ought of self-ownership demand people be allowed to do. With no evasion, tell us what is true, that you do believe prostitutes ought to be able to be prostitutes if they want, that those who want to unalive ought to be able to do that, that polygamists ought to be able to marry as many people as they want, that Skittles people ought to be able to get married, that drug use ought to be legal regardless of the drug. I'd like to get into these distinct philosophies. I think that's enough for us to start with. And with that, I'll yield my time to Dave.
Okay. All right, Dave, whenever you're ready, go ahead. You got up to...
Did my son have pants on, or am I going to have to edit that earlier? This is a note to self. I don't remember. I need to...
Yeah, you might need to edit that.
A little edit there. All right. Libertarianism leads to degeneracy. That's why they have a Skittles nominee. How is this on YouTube? It's crazy. Like, if I was going to say if I was going to talk about this stuff, I would turn the YouTube stream off and go watch it on Odyssey, but YouTube let Andrew leave it up, so I guess we will. Interesting. If people own themselves, we can't stop them from doing voluntary behavior, and that's why Skittles people are running rampant. There's no way this is going to be on YouTube. Like, maybe we have to censor this. I don't know how this guy's getting away with it. That's interesting. Incest, prostitution, suicide, polygamy. I think he said one or two others. God says they're moral plagues. And Christians can justify force used against these people to stop them. Christians have every right to rule and use state power just like libertarians want to do. Christian ethics reject self-ownership. Dave can't demonstrate that self-ownership exists. This was a fairly decent opening statement. He didn't there wasn't rhetorical tricks and there wasn't a lot of crap talking in here. So I'm happy to continue on for now, and then we can address this stuff once we get into it in the discussion. What do you think? Anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I actually kind of wanted to say the same thing. I said, I don't hate this opening statement. I think it makes a lot of tall claims that will need to be substantiated when they get to the discussion point, that like Christian ethics is a solid foundation that has these specific decrees in them, and that libertarianism is exactly like socialism somehow, and that it wants to use the government in ways that they should be able to do, etc. Like, all these claims were made. Some of them I think might be pretty high bars to be made, but it's not like anything in here was like flagrantly awful. So I mean, yeah, that is a prop in his favor.
And Spicy Take, he's right on a couple of these things, and we're going to get into that too. Christian ethics do reject self-ownership. They're all owned by God. They're all... Okay, look. We're talking about Christian stuff here, folks, and so we're going to say things that, if you're a Christian, you might have trouble hearing. So this is going to test your ability to listen to things you might disagree with. Your ideology says that you are owned, basically chattel slaves of God. He can do with you what he wants. He can kill you when and if he wants, how he wants. He can do whatever to you. He can create a universe that causes you nothing but pain and suffering the entire time you're alive in it. And not only is that acceptable and okay, it's actually the good because God chose to do it, and God can't do anything other than that which is good. So, Spicy Take, so far Andrew's right on his ethical frame, which we'll see if he's able to justify.
7 minutes.
Sure. So as I said, I'll make my opening a bit of a response to yours, because I'm just meeting you guys tonight, and I didn't exactly know what I was in for, but
I don't think he knew this was going to be a debate.
I know, Andrew, I have seen on Twitter, you in your bio, you refer to yourself as a paleoconservative, and that I would just say, sorry, were you going to say something? Oh, no, sorry. I would just say that I'm very interested in the re-energizing of that term, and that there are people who consider themselves paleoconservatives today. I'm a big, let's just say I was very influenced, and I've read a lot of paleoconservative thinkers, Paul Gottfried, Pat Buchanan, Sam Francis, guys like this. One of the things that I think was great about all of those guys was that they all, the term paleoconservative actually came from hearkening back to the old right, which were a group of anti-statist right-wingers back who were...
Now, I don't think Dave was prepared for what he was walking into here, which kind of makes it unfair from the get-go, and he's not going to say that because he's being professional about it. But what he's doing right now is talking about things that are kind of unrelated to the topic of the debate, because I'm sure he's not prepared with something poignant.
Or, fighting the New Deal and fighting keeping America out of World War I and out of World War II. I would just say, in response to some of the things you said there, the idea of libertarianism and self-ownership does not at all imply that anyone is allowed to do whatever they want to do. And
it's all, the other thing Dave's doing is something important in a debate seeking truth, which is to try and build bridges from the very beginning, to not come out of the gate saying the other person's some kind of moral monster. He's trying to say, look, paleoconservative, there's a lot of things I respect about that. And he's like, paying the guy's position some compliments. That's a healthy thing to do in a debate.
It certainly doesn't imply that
It shows a
you can't
lack
say
of
something
bias.
is horrifically immoral, even if it doesn't violate the principle of self-ownership. Certainly, property rights would be a great example of where someone wouldn't be allowed to do whatever they want to do if they were on someone else's property who didn't wish to allow them to do that. I think that a lot of the later stuff we probably have to get into in the back and forth and when we're asking each other questions. I think there are lots of examples of degeneracy that you could bring up and ask whether I think we ought to be allowed to do them or not. The question to me isn't so much whether we ought to be allowed to do them, it's how society ought to treat them and what exactly has led us to the point where these awful things are so celebrated. So I'm sure there'll be more time to get into all of these things, but I would just say that I think from what I'm hearing at the beginning here, there's a big misunderstanding of what exactly it is I stand for, and also what kind of the tradition of resisting centralized authoritarian control is really all about. But I'm happy to talk more about this.
All right. Opening statement's done. So I'm going to try to stay out of it
If you have any comments, just start talking, Christian, and I'll pause it.
No.
as much as possible. We'll let you two go back and forth. You only hear from me if the audience can't hear because there's too much talking over each other. Other than
We're
that,
about to have a
about
lot
an hour,
of comments.
15 hour, 20 minutes.
Yeah, another pet peeve is moderators that aren't there. Like, don't agree to be a moderator if you're not going to moderate. And we're about to see a whole lot of not moderating go on here. The moderator's job is to be a representative for the audience, to keep the interlocutors on a path that leads toward truth for everyone's sake, not to just shut up and let them dogfight.
You guys go ahead.
Dave, can you demonstrate for us how you own yourself?
Just going to pause it right there.
Dave, can you demonstrate for us how you own yourself?
What a perfect opening salvo from Andrew's position. I have to give him kudos for that. It was politely asked. It was short and to the point. And it's a foundational question. How does Dave evidence or substantiate self-ownership? Now let's see how Dave responds.
Well, what exactly do you mean by that?
Do you own yourself?
Yes.
Can you demonstrate that?
I mean, I'm demonstrating. We're both demonstrating it right now on this show.
Well, you're not demonstrating that you own yourself.
What do you mean by own?
Well, I think that ownership of a thing
Fair
is
question.
just a social construction. That ownership itself is just a parameter of agreed upon criteria.
Oh, okay, but if you were to,
hang on, let me finish the point.
Sure.
It's important to point out Dave was the first person to interrupt here. So there is that. Although, you know, it was supposed to be a clarifier for the question asked to Dave. I think Dave is saying something. I mean, I'm trying to not be uncharitable here. I'm trying to be honest. I think Dave is trying to buy himself some time to think about a good answer, so he threw it back to him for clarification. He knows what self-ownership means. He could have answered it. Also, I think Andrew is showing his amateurishness around this topic with his answer going straight to social constructions instead of defining it and then noting how it is a social construction.
For which, so that's how we know. So I own that guitar because we agree that I own that guitar. That's it. That's the only reason I own it. I don't think that there's anything which is that you can point to that would demonstrate that this exists outside of a social construction we agree to.
Okay. Well, I'm missing your point here.
My
So
point
you
is
just
that I
kind
think
I don't want to pause it too much, but we're starting to see the interruptions happen already, and the moderator should have just taken control and bought the other person's space to finish what they were saying.
it's a social construction when you say that you own yourself. I don't think
Oh,
that
I didn't say it's not a social construction. But
well, then you don't own yourself?
that's a false binary. I'm not. Hold on one second. Listen.
No. That's a law of logic. You either do or you don't.
Stop. Stop everything. So we're working through the definitions, and I wish that had been done a little bit more clearly. Like, okay, let's begin with our definitions, because this is what we're going to talk about here. What do you consider ownership, Dave? What do you consider ownership, Andrew? What do you consider, how is ownership substantiated? How does that concept come into play? Where does it derive from? What does it follow from? What are its priors? Lay a solid, work together to lay a solid foundation for the conversation, rather than say, this is what it is, how answer that. That's a little bit less useful. The other thing that we just saw is a big debate bro tactic, which I want to call out. Christian, do you want to call us out?
Yeah, I mean, so I like to just call it fallacy bombing. I think there's an official name for it. I don't know what it is. I don't really care. But basically, the idea is that when you say something like, "Oh, this is a fallacy," and you'll see this a lot in these debate bro spheres. Well, they'll say, "Oh, that's a law of the excluded middle says that you can't do it," or "You're doing a tu quoque fallacy," which, when used improperly or as a tool to bludgeon somebody, is completely unproductive, right? So in this instance, Dave was pointing out that what is being presented as a binary isn't actually a binary. We are contesting effectively the premises that have been set up. And Andrew wants to say that, no, this is the law of the excluded middle. It's either yes or no. That could be the case if it was a true binary that he was talking about, but there's no true binary here. So not only is he doing the thing where, rather than just talking through his reasoning, he wants to throw law of the excluded middle out to make himself sound smarter, which is fine. I get it. It's not like the term itself has any problems with it, but he applies it incorrectly, which is just really it makes it one of the best examples of this, where you just throwing around terminology that has to do with either logic or reasoning or identifying bad inference does not automatically make you good at inference. And so it's something that when I see people do it, it pulls red flags out.
It's cringe. It's especially when you do it incorrectly, it's embarrassing. And that's what we just saw. So let's watch that last few seconds again.
Exist outside of a social construction we agree to.
Okay. Well, I'm missing your point here.
My point is that I think it's a social construction when you say that you own yourself. I don't think
I didn't say it's not a social construction. But
well, then you don't own yourself?
Okay, so Dave was about to explain what he meant, and he was interrupted. Bad form. Moderator should have stepped in. Andrew shouldn't have done that. Andrew is showing that he's not actually curious about what Dave thinks. When you interrupt somebody, there's only one valid moment in a debate where you should interrupt the other person. And that's when they are spending time thinking about or addressing or rebutting a point that you don't hold. So maybe they have a misunderstanding about what you're saying. It's okay to politely and apologetically interrupt them and be like, "Oh, sorry for the interruption. I just want to make sure that that my point is clear so that you can address a position I actually hold, instead of wasting everyone's time with burning straw men or whatever." And you can do that politely, and that's a good reason to do it, as long as you don't do that too much. But what just happened shows us that Andrew isn't interested in what Dave thinks. He's not curious about what Dave thinks. He doesn't think Dave might be right, and if he gives Dave the space to explain it, Dave might explain how Dave's right and Andrew's wrong, and Andrew might learn something. No. What happened was Dave got two words out, and Andrew immediately interrupted his clarification about his position with an assertion that it's either that or it's that. Interrupt you. I'm not going to let you talk. It's either that or that. Don't say anything else or I'll interrupt you again. It's either that or that. And when Dave says, well, that's not a true dichotomy, he didn't use that word specifically. The other guy said law of excluded middle. Well, the law of excluded middle would be a valid objection to raise if it was a true dichotomy, meaning it's only one of two options, this or not this. But that's not the case here. So this whole thing is like bad faith interruptions followed by an embarrassment.
That's a false binary. I'm not. Hold on one second.
Listen. No. That's a law of logic. You either do or you don't.
No, I didn't.
So he said false binary, which is just, I guess, another way of saying true dichotomy. Same thing, whatever. He's saying there's more than two options. So this excluded middle bullshit, is not valid.
No, you're.
It would be valid if Andrew could show that it was one of those two things, which he hasn't done.
Asking me if I do or I don't. Do you own that guitar?
Yeah.
Okay, but you just said it's a social construct.
Yeah, but I gave you the criteria for the social construct.
Sure,
would
and
be
I
an
said
agreement
I said I own myself.
Right, but when you
and we
say-
said, so as much as you own
Nope.
that guitar, you've proved
This is
nothing.
incorrect. When I say, do you own
No, it's not.
yourself? And you say, I'm not sure. Law of logic
No,
would...
no, 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 no,
Hang
no.
on, let me
I
finish.
said yes.
Yeah, the law of excluded middle is going to show this. It can only be yes or no. Do you have self-ownership? Yes or no. I own the guitar because we agree we do. Do you only own yourself because we agree you do?
Well, I don't agree that that's what ownership means, but you said yes and I said yes. So we're both exactly even.
Well, then I want to know then I want to know how you own yourself.
Well, look, if you actually look up ownership in like a dictionary, I think the definition that you gave would be a little bit different than that. So do I exercise my control over myself? Do I do so morally? Yes, I think so. And I actually think that in order for us to even have this conversation, we both have, in a sense, agreed to that principle.
I don't think we have.
It's me versus you.
How have we
Do you
agreed?
own the arguments that you're making so far in this conversation?
You don't. How do you?
So you can feel that there's egos involved on both sides in this, and I don't think Dave came into it with an ego, but he's being attacked, so he's responding defensively in ways that are also not constructive. But this is why it's important to not be an attack dog if your goal is finding truth. I don't think that's Andrew's goal here. I think Andrew's goal here is to entertain his audience and get some more subscribers by talking to one of the most prominent libertarians in the world. I find that distasteful and disdainful, and that's why I don't follow the guy. But it's important to call out, because had this conversation been broached constructively, we would have started by saying, okay, well, let's agree on a definition of ownership. And what does that mean? And both sides would have, I guess Andrew would have probably said, ownership is that which everyone agrees is mine. And Dave would have probably said, ownership is the right to exclude others from the use of a thing. And then we would have realized that there's a canyon in between those two definitions. And instead of arguing about this follow-on stuff, excluded middle debate bro bullshit, we would actually talk about the core principle in play, ownership, what it is, and why they disagree on it. You have anything to say? I'll hit play.
I just feel like, we're going to keep trudging through. These next few minutes there's something. But I feel like I just have to point out that if someone asks you to demonstrate how you own yourself, do you own your guitar and do you own your arguments are not the places that you should be starting with this, right? It's exactly like Patrick said. You should be getting clear on what someone means when they ask the question, do you own X or Y or Z? If it's yourself, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, what do you mean when you say the word own? We clarify that, then we can get some work done. Because if we can't even agree on what the word own is, just like Patrick was saying, we can't get any further. We're going to be talking past each other. And on top of that, I mean, this has very clearly been prepared by Andrew, like we were saying earlier. He knew exactly the line that he was going to push when he came into this conversation. And he had prepared for almost probably anything that Dave could have said here. Probably even exactly what Patrick said, I would imagine. He's probably aware of this what I think to be the defensible libertarian definition of property. But he's not even getting that here. He's getting, do you own your arguments? Do you own your guitar? These just throwing back empty questions rather than trying to get some kind of clarity, establish some grounding for them to develop and argue from. Yeah,
most libertarians don't ever spend the time thinking about the foundations of their beliefs in this area. And I'm not saying that they should feel bad for that. Like, most people don't spend time thinking about philosophy because they have a job to go to and a family to feed, and that's fine. It's just us weird nerds.
They're not
that
nerds.
Think about this stuff. But you know what else the normal person doesn't do? They don't come on debates to hash out these topics. And if you're going to show up to a debate, you got to be ready, and you got to know what you believe and why you believe it, or you're going to be caught being like, do you own your guitar? And like that non-responsive and kind of. But again, in Dave's defense, I don't think he was prepared to have a harsh debate about this stuff, so he didn't come prepared, and I suspect that's not his fault. I bet a producer scheduled this and put it on his calendar as an interview or whatever, and he just showed up and connected to the video. I'm giving Dave grace here is what I'm trying to do.
You own an argument.
Right.
No,
And another reason we're doing this video is we're going to show up for Dave, and we're going to give some good arguments that we're ready to give.
I mean, when I say that, I mean, is it yours? Are
It came out of my mouth,
Are
sure.
the words you're saying yours?
But how would
the words I'm
that
saying
make
mine?
the application that
The interruption is completely unnecessary and counterproductive to finding truth, and it should just be shut down immediately by the moderator unless it's interrupting for clarification. I'm not going to repeat that over and over, but it's really bad, and it's stupid, and it shows a lack of self-control, and it shows debate bro tactics. You're just trying to win instead of find truth. It's an annoyance. It's a pet peeve of mine. Also, arguments are not property. I don't know where Dave is going with this. Arguments are neither scarce nor rivalrous. They're just things that we say. So I'm not sure.
I own that thing.
Well, look again. Define own.
I think that the definition of ownership would be a social construct in which you and I, via agreement criteria, decide that X thing becomes property which is assigned to me.
Okay.
That's the ontological backing for it, but he didn't define what it is, right?
Yeah. So if
by
that's
that
true,
wrong?
by that
that I own that thing.
well, look again. Define own.
I think that the definition of ownership would be a social construct in which you and I, via agreement criteria, decide that X thing becomes property which is assigned to me.
Okay.
So that's how you come to own something, not what ownership is. There's a difference between those two questions. Dave asked what ownership is. Ownership is the right to exclude others from the use of a thing. I wish that he had pushed back and clarified. But what Andrew is trying to make the debate about is the ontology of how, not ontology, no. It's the process, the mechanism by which you come to own something. Like, what it's a meta question. It's not what is ownership, it's how is ownership, which is a different question that Andrew is fixated on, even though Dave didn't ask him that question.
Yeah. So
by
if that's
that
true,
by that definition, do you?
Sorry, did you say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
go for it.
we may have gotten some clarity on that. I honestly, I don't think that point ever becomes as explicit as it should have been. But we may have gotten some clarity on that point if we had David given of the very reasonable libertarian reply of like, oh well, I believe ownership is the right to exclude another from the use of a thing, and from there we could have evolved, and Andrew would have had to clarify from that point what he was talking about, and the debate could have maybe gone into an interesting direction about foundational commitments to ownership claims, various types of ownership claims. But we don't get there because of all of the things that have been culminating up to this point.
We're in tit for tat mode. I'm going to say something and the other person's going to interrupt the last part of what I said to say something, and then I'm going to interrupt the last part of what he said to say something, so that we can both try and maintain control over the discourse. We're not in deep breath. Let's be calm. Let's stay focused on wanting to learn if we're wrong. Let's let the other person speak. Let's work together. That's the mode that you find truth in, not whatever the hell this is. I did that once in a video on the old Disenthrall channel where I'm almost embarrassed to bring up this video because some of you might go look it up, and I think it's still live on the channel. But I was in the park with my family, and a proselytizing Christian comes up to me in the middle of this park with a camera in my face wanting to ask me about my beliefs in God, to try and convince me that I'm a sinner that needs redemption. And he tried some tactics, and me being the philosophy loving guy that enjoys a good clash of ideas, was just so excited by the opportunity to have a cool conversation, because I really am. Like, when I tell you guys, I just love good conversations. Contact me if you think I'm wrong. I'm not lying. I actually do really like it. And so this guy comes up to me in the park, and he wasn't expecting the enthusiasm with which I responded to him. And but it became like that. It became a tit for tat, back and forth. I would cut him off and say something, and he would cut me off and say something, and it stopped being about figuring out what was true, and it started being about me winning the discussion. And I remember Kaysen, producer from Disenthrall, good friend of mine. He says, I was asking him like what I could have done better, what I did wrong, and he's like, man, sometimes you just need to pause, just take a breath. Like when you're in when you start responding quick and things start progressing really fast, the best thing you can do is just think about it and then say something back. Just allow space, make space for there to be thought and contemplation about what's going on. It's exactly what I would do in this situation with Andrew. When he's tit-tat back forth, cutting me off, not letting me say something, I would just stop talking for a while and wait until he finished. And I would formulate my thoughts. I would calm myself down. And then I would re-engage. The other thing I would do is the moment the tit-for-tat interruption stuff started, seeing as how the moderator is not doing his effing job right now, is I would have done that job. I would have said, hey, I'm totally interested in having this conversation with you, Andrew. I want to learn if I'm wrong. And I might be, and you might know something I don't. And I would love for you to give me the benefit of your wisdom in an area that I might be wrong on. I have a ground rules for, talking with people about this stuff, though. And rule number one is, I promise I will not interrupt you. And I would ask that you return that respect to me in kind. And if we can have that agreement, then we can proceed in this conversation. I've never had somebody not agree to that. It's just so obvious and polite and normal and just basic stuff. And then they agree. And then going forward, next time they interrupt you, be like, hey, I'm going to have to hold you to your agreement. You agreed to not interrupt me. So, please don't do that again. And if they continue, just be like, hey, man, I can't have a discussion with somebody that can't keep their word. So I'm going to have to leave if you can't keep your word about our deal that we made. And, spoiler alert, this works on everyone. And I don't mean it works like a trick, like I'm giving you something to trick people with. I mean, this is how you can conduct your life with other adults, and also how you can parent your children better. You make explicit deals with them, and they hold you to your side, and you hold them to their side, and it's called voluntary, consent-based, property rights-based agreement, and it's a great way to go through life, and it works. And I would use it since the moderator's not doing it.
You own yourself.
I would say by the definition of that social construction, I could say that you own yourself, sure.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't mean anything. Let me explain why.
Okay.
Because if the social,
what did we just do this whole time?
Let me explain. Because if the social construction, what if we change the social construct and we decide that you can own a person, Dave?
Right. Okay. And what if we change the social construct and says, I own your guitar and I own you? What do you,
that's exactly
point?
right. What if we
Okay.
change the social construction of ownership to mean you can own a person? Does that mean that people no longer own themselves?
Well, the difference here, right, is that, and it's the word that I mentioned that you didn't, is that I would say that ownership would imply that you're justified in that claim.
How are you justified in that claim?
How am I justified in the claim of owning myself?
Yeah, you just said if you agreed it's
Okay.
a social construction. So if we agree that it's a social construction, then we can own other people as via a social construction. That would be justified.
Well, I don't think so. So the major difference there, right, is that
I'll let Dave finish the
as
sentence.
we're having this conversation, and clearly what's the goal here? To persuade, probably not to persuade each other, but at least to persuade the audience who's listening to us, because we recognize that they are in control. Forget the word own, because that's triggering, evidently, but they are
I'm
in
not triggered by the word own.
So what Dave did there was take a shot back by accusing the other guy of triggering. Also unnecessary, but I also understand that Dave's a little miffed right now because of how how he's being treated.
Okay. When I say triggering, meaning that's going to start a whole nother debate about semantics. So
Yeah, but semantics are important in a debate.
okay, well, all right. Let's not do this tactic of interrupting every 2 seconds. So let me just finish my point here.
So what Dave should have done is what I said earlier, make that an explicit agreement that he asked Andrew to consent to, rather than just be like, let's just not be dicks. Which I get. That's the desire, but a better way to accomplish that goal would be to say it like I said earlier and get Andrew to say, okay, I agree, I won't interrupt you. You know, like it's, and another thing I'll say in debates sometimes is, look, Andrew, I know you're not scared of what I'm about to say. So if you could just let me say it, and then you can go ahead and come back and destroy me, you know, like that's fine, but you're not scared of what I'm saying. So let me get it out, unless you are scared, right? You know, like this is.
So we are both presuming that the people who are listening to this are in control of their own thoughts, and we could potentially persuade them toward our cause. And so if we're doing all of this, we kind of are recognizing in some sense that it's more valuable to persuade people than it is to, I don't know, just enforce our will on them. And so in that sense, I would say that, yes, there is some kind of norm that there's a justifiable path where you can persuade people versus force them.
Sure. Well,
so the persuade versus force is an indicator that he's referring to argumentation ethics as his foundation for why you can't use force and why other people own themselves. We've done a video on that on Disenthrall, which we should probably re-upload. Where was it, Disenthrall or was it Anarchast? It's been so long. Okay, where we disassembled completely, fully, and finally argumentation ethics as both a moral philosophy and as a valid legal argumentation tactic. I just wanted to point that out for those that didn't catch the way Dave is using these words. He's basing his position on argumentation ethics. To argue with somebody instead of use force against them, they say that you're tacitly saying that argumentation is better than coercion, and you're tacitly affirming that the other person owns themselves and has the right to not be attacked by choosing to, engage with them verbally. Christian, let me know if I made that too truncated to be accurate, but I think that's a good summary.
I think it's fair. And again, I just kind of want to reiterate that, like, we've moved from, okay, in Dave's fairness, we've moved away from like questions about guitars to a more like, he could massage his position a little bit better here, but at least we were able to recognize what he was saying, that he's going on this like, okay, we've got like an argumentation ethics line going on here. Again, they're still operating on two completely different axes right now. Andrew is talking about like the metaphysics of ownership, and Dave is talking about like a morally justifiable conception of who owns what. And they're still talking past each other. So now even if we are getting like somewhere closer to more concrete positions, they're still not on the same wavelength. And so therefore they cannot be in a position to where they are going to come to an understanding on each other's ideas. They're literally operating in different regions.
Which makes it completely unproductive. We are not seeking truth right now. We're just talking at each other and getting more and more contentious. Andrew's original question 10 minutes ago now to Dave was, how do you justify your self-ownership? That's what he's trying to get to. And everything that's happened since then has been non-productive to answering that question, and will probably continue to be so for a while.
I agree that you can persuade all sorts of people, and that can be part of a societal norm, and that everybody can agree that that's part of a societal norm. Right. That does not demonstrate that you own yourself. Thus, the key principle for the non-aggression principle, which is self-ownership, that's where the violation comes in. Do people own themselves? Is that a justified position, or isn't it?
I'm saying that, yes, I think it is. But again,
that was a well-asked question on Wilson's part. He was clear about exactly not only what he's asking in terms of I need you to justify self-ownership for me, Dave, but he's also giving away the next step where he's going with it. He's saying, you guys claim to live by the non-aggression principle that depends on you owning yourself. So if you can't justify owning yourself, then your nap is kind of nonsense, right? So we know now, like, if you're slowing down enough to listen to your interlocutor, you should be saying, oh, this is where he's going and what he's wanting from me.
And can you demonstrate it?
Well, what would you mean by that? What would it mean to demonstrate that
you
own
would
yourself?
you would have to prove that you own yourself.
That I can control myself, or what again, just be clear about what you're
Well,
asking.
So unfortunately, Dave is kind of not having an answer here. Andrew is asking Dave, show your work. You claim to own yourself. Show your work. Prove that you own yourself. How do you come to own yourself? And Dave responds with, prove that I control myself, ? Ownership is not control, but also they haven't defined ownership very clearly yet. So we don't know what we're talking about. And Christian's right. We're still talking past each other.
Here, let me give you an example. Yeah, I'll give you an example to the contrary. I have seen throughout all of human history that human beings seem to be able to own other human beings without much problem. That doesn't seem to be a problem. As long as the social construction of ownership of the time states that you can own another person, you seem to be able to just fine.
Right.
So this axiom of self-ownership is not obvious to me. To be an axiom, it has to be self-apparent and self-obvious.
So what demonstrated that people owned other people throughout time?
Nitpick. To be an axiom, it doesn't have to be obvious or self-evident. To be an axiom, you just declare something an axiom. It just makes it a foundation or a premise for an argument. And if somebody else comes along and challenges the axiom or disproves it, then the argument fails. But all an axiom means, it's just a premise. It's just a starting point for an argument. And it doesn't mean that calling something an axiom is not the same thing as saying that a thing is true. Like, you can have axioms that are false where you build structures on.
Or entirely arbitrary.
Yes. Yes. People call things axioms as if, like, people that don't know what they're saying will call things axioms in an attempt to get other people to not question them and to just accept them as facts so that they can then move on to construct the rest of their house of cards on top of them.
Prove that to me. The same way you just said to me, prove to me that I own myself.
But I did.
No. Hold on.
I'll prove it to you again.
Well, hold on. Let's try to not. We're only a couple minutes.
You interrupted me. I didn't interrupt you.
Well, hold on. You just asked me to prove
that was dishonest.
Myself, and then you asserted that throughout history people owned other people. So prove that.
Yeah, but we already did, and let me explain how. You and I already agreed that ownership is a social construction, and that throughout history, the social construction had changed where people were able to own other people via the social construct. So whatever the social construct is of the day, that's all it is. As long as you agree that ownership is a social construction, you basically have to bite that bullet, right?
Wait, no, I'm not even understanding what you're saying here. So we agreed it was a social construct, and then your next statement after that was, prove to me that you own yourself.
Yeah, a social construction doesn't exist in objective reality.
Right.
It's a term.
Prove to me that anyone ever owned someone else throughout history. And all you said was it was a social construct as well.
You mean like a contract of ownership between slaves or something?
No, it's your question. So you tell me how to
answer my claim is that ownership is a social construction. Do you agree or disagree with that claim?
I think it is a social construct, but there also can be ethical and non-ethical or moral and immoral.
Well, then if you make the assertion that it's anything more than a social construction, then the burden of claim is on you to demonstrate how it could be.
Well, okay. I mean, again, you're dodging my question here. I asked you the same question you asked me, and you weren't able to answer it either.
I did answer it.
By the way, part of the reason why I asked is because I don't exactly understand the question you're asking me. Are you asking me to say why I think, how I could prove that it is moral that one person should own themselves rather than someone else own them? Is that
that's not the question? The question. So here's the question. Let me explain it to you.
Okay.
The non-aggression principle itself revolves around the idea that human beings own themselves, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the thing is that you and I can agree that there's been tons and tons of slavery throughout human history, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So those people clearly own these other people. So this has to be a social construction of agreement is what is ownership.
What Andrew just did was well done. He led the other person through a series of questions, waited for them to answer, and then continued the series of questions towards a conclusion without interrupting him. Good job.
Agree that you own it, therefore you own it. What I'm asking for is some type of justified evidence that that is not the case and that there is some moral ought or some type of demonstration, philosophically or otherwise, that a human being actually owns themselves.
Okay, so just to be clear here, if I were to say, if you're saying ownership meaning just strictly control over who has something, then yes, there have been lots of times where people can come just take all your stuff and then claim they own it. And if you're saying the law recognizes it or the society recognizes it, then essentially they own it. So
they can do that with people too, right?
Right. And in a sense, I agree with you. And that
so then you don't own yourself.
Okay.
The interruption is obnoxious.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Shut up.
Dude,
Shut up.
We got a lot
Moderator.
Show here, so let's just let each other talk.
Mute his mic.
So in a sense, I agree with you. Yes, you can take possession of something. I don't think anybody is arguing that, and I don't think it's a very impressive point to make that, yes, people can take possession of something, and that could be codified by law or society. What we're talking about is like...
No one codifies ownership as control of something. No one anywhere, no property system, except maybe the commies. Possession is not the same thing as ownership. Ownership is the right to exclude others, the right to control something, not the active capacity of controlling something. If a thief takes your wallet, the moment they're in control of the wallet, this would be to say that they own the wallet, which means they have the right to it, which means you no longer have the right to take it back because they now own it, because they control it. This is not how anybody recognizes property, except maybe commies.
I want to push on this just a little bit too, because I feel like what Dave is trying to do, on one hand, I can see where he's going with this, and that he's trying to split the conversation into a like mechanics of controlling objects angle of ownership, and then he wants to go down this moral analysis of like, what is the right system of ownership that would include self-ownership within it. And I get that. I see where he's going with it. But in doing so, he's automatically giving the term ownership over to the control perspective, to this like communitarian notion of ownership that it comes down to whether or not I have a thing in my hand at any given moment. Like Patrick said, it's obviously not the case that control is the determinant factor in whether or not you own a given thing, because otherwise, as soon as your car got stolen, it's no longer yours. That's not how this works under any system. So just even in the way that he's trying to, and I grant him this, he's trying to build a space for them to move in a good direction. He's not doing so in a way that's doing him any favors. So you have to be careful of these things whenever you don't want to, in a building a bridge, you don't want to make yourself into the bridge.
Yeah. I think Davis, I think Andrew has a valid point of attack, and I think we're kind of waiting until later in the discussion for Christian and I to actually say what Dave should have said and what the libertarian position on this stuff should be, antisubjectivism.com. Yeah. I mean, it's clear, I think, that Dave is on the defensive and doesn't have a ready answer to this question, which most libertarians don't. And that's why Christian and I have been doing a lot of the philosophy work that we've been doing over the past several years.
Is something slightly different, which is justified ownership over something. So
Right.
then the claim is like whether it's morally right that you own this or not. Fair enough. And I'm sure there's lots
I'm just
of
looking
areas,
for the
but I'm sure
demonstration
there's
of what is
lots
morally right. Sure.
Sure. Well, okay. If you're looking for the demonstration of what is morally right, I'm sure there's lots of areas where you would believe something is morally right and something else is wrong. And the demonstration of it would be what? That this is what you believe. This is what seems to be right and wrong. This is what has been accepted. And
No, my justification would be divine command, not seemings or phenomenal conservatism,
okay,
which is what
sure.
seemings are.
Okay, so what we just witnessed was Dave kind of bringing up a phenomenological conservatism, intuitionism sort of justification for morality, and then we also saw that Andrew is familiar with that philosophy, as well as an admission of his foundation for morality, which is, what did he say specifically? I don't want to get it wrong.
Divine command.
Divine command. God told me so. Do we comment on this now, or do we let it go for a while?
I don't know. Should we just like read Euthyphro, or we can,
Okay.
maybe we can get to that later.
Yeah.
Okay, but so divine command. So what? And how would you exactly determine what is and isn't divine command?
Well, let's assume for a second that I was, I don't know, like delirious, right? And just thought I talked to God, and He gave me commands, right? If it's just preference, if we're just going off of preference, just things which Dave prefers are true, and Dave just prefers that you own yourself because he does, then any preference that I came up with in this delirious state where God was speaking directly to me would be just as valid as whatever preference that you just axiomatically come to because you just want them to be true. My claim here is that libertarianism.
You look like you're about to say something.
I have to say, this game, not real debate that's going on here, this game that Andrew is playing, he is phenomenal at. Like, he is complete. One of the first things that people will go to in critiquing divine command theory is that, like, oh, well, how do you know you're not just like crazy hearing the voice? He's literally seeding that. He's saying, I don't need this. I'm going to give you this. I'm just a crazy person with voices babbling in my head. That means we're on the same level from your perspective. How do you answer that? I mean, he's very good at this. You can't take that away from him. The game that they're playing is one that he is well prepared to win at.
He's definitely defended his position before, and someone else has definitely pressed him back against the wall of, how do you know that the voice in your head that you think is God is true? And he's definitely been pressed up against that wall and found out that he can't justify that position because it's a superstition. But but the point is, it's a feels-based position, just like what he's asserting Dave's position of intuitionism is a feels-based position, which it is. But I don't think that's what Dave's position is. I think we're going to find out later that Dave is also into God told me so as a justification for morality. But you're right. Yeah, Andrew has definitely been pressed on this before, and he's prepared for it, and he even seated it up front, and he did it in a way to say that, yeah, we're now even. We both just say things are immoral because we really think they are for various personal subjective reasons, and neither of us are presenting an objective universal justification for morality, which is an interesting place for this conversation to be that I'm not sure most people really caught because it was going by so fast because they're interrupting each other constantly.
At its foundation, at its fundamental foundation, is flawed because this axiom of self-ownership isn't actually true, but rather a social construction which is asserted as though it is a truism when it clearly is not. So it's a fundamental flaw. The reason that you guys come up with such absurd conclusions like that prostitution ought to be legal and all these other things is, and by the way, Dave, you have to end up with that. Otherwise, people don't own themselves.
Calling them absurd conclusions is sort of poisoning the well, but which is an unnecessary debate tactic.
Do you think the state should come in and, like, stop your brother from unaliving himself, for instance? Do you think that they should do that?
Well, hold on. All right. Stick with your point that you were making at first, because you're just jumping all around here.
Well, no, I'm
the first thing you were saying.
Well, I already gave you the point. I'm saying I reject your axiom. I reject the axiom of self-ownership until otherwise demonstrated. That's my point.
Okay, so what would you, so you're saying that if I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand the first part that you're saying here because I'm not getting it at all. So you're saying if somebody hallucinated that something was right and wrong and it was horrifically not right and wrong, that somehow that disproves the idea that anything is right or wrong?
If it's only axiomatic and based on preference, it would be just as valid. So how do you
determine if anything is morally right or wrong?
If it's from a preference base, you couldn't.
Okay, so how do you determine that anything is morally right or wrong?
I do it from divine command. You do it from preference. I'm
no, you do it from divine command. What does that mean? Explain that.
So this means that I follow Christian ethics. I use transcendental categories inside of philosophy to create justifications for the values which come from God's laws. That's what I do.
That's a lot of words to not say anything. How do you determine?
You know what transcendental?
Right or wrong?
That's not true for people that follow apologetics. The transcendental foundation for his epistemology and ontology and moral framework, that is a thing that a lot of Christians believe in. So he didn't say nothing, Dave. I just not sure knew what that stuff meant, which you look, this is my point. And I guess I'll keep repeating it. It's like, we're not here to find truth. We're here to win a debate. And so we're not showing curiosity. What did you mean by transcendental categories? Explain that to me. That's interesting. Maybe there's something there I've never heard of before. I want to learn. That's curiosity. That's wanting to know you're right or you're wrong, and to learn that you're wrong. Not this back and forth stuff. Neither of them cares about the other person. They just both want to win a debate right now.
Do you know what transcendental categories
I don't
are?
understand the words.
It sounds like you don't
me.
understand.
Okay, explain it to me like I'm really stupid. I don't understand any of the words. So explain it to me. How do you determine if something is right and wrong?
Okay, so what I would do to make these determinations is we start with objective versus subjective. Is it a subjective value or is it an objective value? If we start with it just being a subjective value, then who cares? We never need to go any further than that. We just never need to go any further for justification. So what I've determined is that your values here in libertarianism are subjective value based. Therefore, there's never a reason for me to justify anything objectively to you, because any subjective preference I have is just as valid.
You're not answering my question at
literally,
all.
that's the most precise answer you could ever get.
Andrew,
if you're
how do you determine if
I
something
just
is
told
right or wrong?
you divine command.
And then I asked you what that means, and you said
I just
nothing.
Explained.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
you just said that you think my basis is subjective.
Okay, fine, Dave. I'll make it super simple because God tells me so. Is that better for you?
Sure. No,
okay.
if that's the answer. That's
the answer.
Okay.
God tells me so.
God tells you.
Yeah.
Like, and through what means does God tell you this?
He directly communicates right into my brain. He's like, that shit's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, but okay. So, okay. So, just to be clear.
To be clear, he doesn't actually. He's doing this because he knows he can. He doesn't actually believe that, or he doesn't have the voice of God inside of his head, and he doesn't believe that this is how he learns that things are right and wrong. He has a much more complicated process that he was going to probably outline in great detail before Dave interrupted him. And the only reason that he's picking up this position that, based on Dave's reaction, Dave did the classic, the chuckle, oh, really? Voice inside of your head, is because Andrew knows that Dave is not going to be able to come back at him with any substantive critique other than, voice inside your head, and then Andrew's just going to get to say, you just made it up. That's where we're at. That's where this debate is. These are the things that are going through these people's heads right now. No one is sitting here going, man, maybe there's a point here. Maybe I should consider something like this, or maybe they haven't thought about it this way before. They're going, oh my God, if I move my rook to d4, then I can make sure that I pinch off his queen before he can do the divine command shuffle on me. And it's like, sorry.
Yeah.
The point of that is that, Andrew, it sounds very good when you attack someone and say that's subjective. But when your response to that is God communicates directly into my brain, that also, I mean, I don't know what the word is for that.
Subjective
would probably be the word.
But that's my whole point. That's how I'm granting your entire argument. It's like, it doesn't matter ultimately, objectively.
But your counter is also subjective. So
right. So then that means that my preference is no worse than your own preference.
Well, I mean, no, it means by your argument, we're even.
Yeah. If I'm using preference-based... if I'm using preference-based arguments, or I'm sorry, preference-based morality, and you're using preference-based morality,
no, listen,
then we're equal, Dave.
To be clear, I don't think I am using preference-based morality.
Got it. So can you make justification then?
Shut up.
Let me try to finish the sentence here. I don't think I am making subjective-based morality.
It's childlike. It shows a lack of self-control, and then if you don't infantilize them like I just did, and actually say, okay, maybe they're doing it on purpose. Now it goes from just being childlike and sort of ignorant and accidental to being sort of malicious and disingenuous and dishonest. So which is it? That's a true dichotomy. No, I'm just kidding.
Also, I can't help but notice, I mean, he's just burning through the cigarettes. Like, this is Andrew's third cigarette already. I mean, he is going through them, man. Like, breathe,
he's excited,
brother.
He's excited.
You accused me of that. And so my response to you is, so what's your objective base? And your response is, God talks to me directly into my head.
Yeah, for the purpose of demonstration.
All right. By the way, God also talks to me in my head, and so
perfect.
All right, fine. Like,
yeah.
All right.
So if God
by
talks,
your own standard,
there you go.
You haven't won anything. By your own standard, we're even.
It's not here to win it. It's here to demonstrate it.
I want to
Dave.
try to let's try if we can, because we're only a few minutes into this. Let's try. This got more contentious than I thought it would in the first few minutes. Let's try to just, by the way, because I want to have a good conversation with you, and I've been told by people who I love and trust that you were a guy to have a good conversation.
Yeah, but you keep on evading every question that I have for you.
Oh, all right. I don't.
Dave was trying to build a bridge there. Good job, Dave. He was trying to de-escalate. He was trying to calm things down and bring it back home. And Andrew decided, nope, I don't want that. I want my blood sport, and I want to entertain my audience and get clout more than I want to find truth. So I'm going to kick you in the dick in exchange for your attempt to build a bridge. Just despicable. Just stupid.
I think I have, but
so
okay.
let's answer.
Ask me a direct question.
Great.
I'm happy to answer.
Should the state come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself or not, Dave?
I would want them to. Yes.
Yes. Would you want the state to?
Try to just, by the way, because I want to have a good conversation with you, and I've been told by people who I love and trust that you were a guy to have a good conversation.
Yeah, but you keep on evading every question that I have for you.
Oh, all right. I don't think I have, but
so
okay.
let's answer.
Ask me a direct question.
Great.
I'm happy to answer.
Should the state come in and stop your brother from unaliving himself or not, Dave?
I would want them to. Yes.
Yes. Would you want the state to stop a man from having sex with his sister if it would lead to a non-reproductive act?
Christ.
First of all, Dave, what the hell, man? Like, you just declared as an anarcho-capitalist that you want the state to come in and do something. Maybe that was an accident.
We'll see. How about that?
Okay.
Maybe he'll clarify.
Wait, if it would lead to a non-reproductive act?
Yeah, she has no uterus.
But that was supposed to be worse than if it would reproduce?
Yeah, it would be worse. It would be less worse.
I'm just saying that seemed like an unnecessary caveat to throw on there. But okay. Wait, Jesus Christ. What you're talking about, like adults or children?
Adults.
What Dave is doing is not authentic. What Dave is doing is a tactic. And I want to point this out for people that might not have caught what he's doing. He's putting on a sort of a show of disgust to act like he's uncomfortable with this kind of debate, to put pressure back on Andrew for bringing up a difficult topic in a philosophical debate. Difficult topics and philosophical debates. I haven't had a good philosophical debate where we didn't get into difficult topics, because the truth truth is in the edge cases, not in the average boring mundane stuff. You find truth and you find the edge of truth where it flips into falsehood. You don't find that on, everyday mundane stuff. You find that, well, I'm repeating myself, but yeah. So Dave is trying to slow roll it so that he doesn't immediately come off unreasonable if he bites the bullet and says that consenting adults should be able to do what they want with their bodies when there's no victims. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay, fine. Because for children, obviously, that'd be, yeah, I guess I would want them to.
Okay, so you want the state
again, like 0 for 2 right now.
You laid him up. You were like, oh, when he obviously, he's setting up this whole discuss tactic so that when he gives the hard answer that some people won't like about how consenting adults can do whatever they want with their bodies, that, he's got this discuss shield up. And then he goes, oh, how gross. Yeah, I guess I do want the state to stop people from doing that. Breathe. He's got more time. Maybe he'll correct. Maybe he'll course correct. It's
utilize.
Fine. And so Andrew is, in my opinion, debate bro disgusting childlike behavior aside, like, in which case Andrew has lost. In my mind, when I watch debates, I discount. I try and control for this stuff. But on the points, I think Andrew has won almost every round on the merits. So he nailed Dave on self-ownership, didn't get a response to how ownership works. And now he's nailing him on he's got two concessions out of Dave for statist conclusions that violate the non-aggression principle.
Authority.
Well, not just the state. I would want anyone.
Okay,
Stop
so
that.
so I don't
Anyone
understand.
with the force to do it, or
Great.
anyone with the strength to do
So
it. Sure.
so then those people don't own themselves.
No, I don't think that's the conclusion.
Well, if they own themselves, can you demonstrate what they're doing wrong?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
But that's a very silly and very look, this is a very like childish interpretation of libertarianism.
You're still not answering the question. You're just rattling.
No. I
Dodge and weave, Dave.
It is.
You
dodging.
can do it. Just keep dodging.
And I've criticized Dave for this before. Calling something silly or absurd is not a counter argument. It's a crutch.
I immediately answered the question, and now I'm responding to the point you made. So I immediately said, yes, anyone with the authority to do it, please stop, or the power to do it, please stop. And then I was responding to what you said. So I did answer the question. What I'm saying is that the idea that if you own yourself, and this is the fundamental mistake that you made at the beginning, therefore I can't say anything is immoral, is ridiculous. And not only in the libertarian worldview, but in any worldview, there are lots of things, and I'm sure in yours, where there could be things that you don't think are illegal, but you still, or you don't think should be illegal, but you still think are wrong. So that doesn't mean anything. If I think people own themselves, I can't think there's something horribly wrong about this.
That's not.
This goes back to not having set up our definitions in the very beginning. So we should have defined what being moral and immoral means. If something is immoral, can force be used to stop it from happening? Or is it only certain immoral things? Like the stuff that he's talking about. Like, can you think something's immoral and also not be justified in coercing someone to prevent it?
Not the point. So I'll explain again.
Okay, sure. So please.
If you want the state to go in, if a brother is banging his sister and she can't reproduce, I don't know how you could demonstrate.
Why does reproducing matter in this?
I'll explain
Sure.
why, so that you can't.
You don't need to interrupt
reproduction
him.
as being a harm because
Dave.
you can have like some kid who's all fucked up. So I'm just taking that out of the equation.
Okay. I gotcha.
I'm just taking that out of the equation, right? She has no uterus. They can't reproduce, or maybe they're homosexuals, right? And they're just related. If they own themselves and they're adults, that is exactly what you would make the argument for gay marriage. They're adults. These adults are consenting with each other. Can you actually justify why that's wrong?
Sure.
Then justify why it's wrong.
Well, I can justify why it's wrong. Okay, there's two separate questions here. And this is almost like, I think what you need to pick apart. So, look, there's two questions. One is, could I justify someone using force to stop them? And then there's, could I justify why it's wrong? You get where those are two different things?
Yeah, I'm just asking why it's wrong.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah,
but
so let's do that.
Okay. Do you get why those are two different things, though? You get the point I'm making?
Yeah, sure. So can you answer the question now?
Yeah, dude.
It's like you have the high ground. Don't be a dick. Like Andrew has Dave cornered on a question that Dave is not answering. And Andrew just needlessly just poisoned the discussion further than he already has.
Listen, man, do you want to have a decent back
and what this has done is given Dave another thing to talk about instead of answering the question that Andrew asked him. Now Dave gets to talk about the tone of the debate. And we're even farther away from a path towards finding truth or learning that we're wrong, because now we're going to have a tone discussion about how one of the guys is being a dick.
Forth here, or do you want to not?
You're still not answering.
Andrew is responsible for what's happening right now. He thinks he's winning, and he's probably getting internet clout behind this. But he's responsible for this.
answering the question.
Okay.
Can you justify why it's actually wrong for two consenting adults?
Yeah. See, the thing is, I am answering the question. You're just kind of being a dick
Well,
and trying to win the debate.
When are
rather
you
than
going to
having a
answer the
conversation.
question, Dave?
See,
All right, give him a chance.
so is
Andrew.
that actually like? Does anyone listen?
Oh, the
Was that the-
moderator's here.
Was that the first time we had a moderator?
Yeah, finally. When people are getting like actually pissed off at the conversation, we've left. By the way, just to make sure it's clear, we've completely this whole conversation is scuffed. Everybody's deep in their feels. People are pissed off. To recover this and put it into a place that becomes not just like a simulacrum of a useful conversation, but an actually productive one is practically impossible at this point.
Yeah, and
So thanks, moderator. Glad you showed up now.
Andrew did it, and that's my point. Dave, in his opening statement, spent the first minute or two building a bridge. Later, after the discussion got contentious, he tried to slow it down, bring it back, make it chill, build another bridge, got kicked in the dick for it, and now Andrew's continuing to just kick in the dick. When he's on the high ground, when he's winning, when he's got his opponent back cornered, he's given Dave an excuse now to bitch about how we're being mean to each other rather than engage on for the purposes of finding truth. Andrew did this to this debate. That's what I'm trying to make clear here.
Listening to this, think this makes for like good debate tactics? No, you actually are not like recognizing that there's a difference between these two things. So
I just told you I do.
Let's
All right, do you guys want to do this, man?
He interrupted him again, which now gave Dave another thing to prevaricate about. Andrew is derailing this over and over and over.
I fucking like honestly, dude. This is
You've
just like,
talked. We've talked way more than I have, Dave. I just want you to answer my question. Can you justify it or not, bro?
Okay. So anyway, I'll go back to saying, do you guys want to do this? Do you guys want to like do a show here, or like what's the point of this?
You want to? I asked you specifically if you wanted a conversation or a debate. You said a debate. We're debating.
No. I didn't say that. I said we could do whatever you want to do, dude.
Yeah. So we're doing a debate. So let's not do a meta conversation. Just answer the question.
A debate doesn't mean you talk over me every time I try to answer.
I just want you to answer the question.
No. I understand you.
No one even remembers what his question is anymore. Andrew did that with these Bloodsport debate bro tactics. This is anti-truth seeking. That's what I'm trying to tell you. This is not debate. This is Bloodsport for internet clout, and it's shameful. It's embarrassing.
Someone will say to this inevitably. They'll see our commentary and they'll go, "Oh, I've seen Andrew do way worse," or "I've seen way worse than this. He's got the kid gloves on for Dave. This isn't that bad. You know, this isn't even in the top 30 of most contentious debates I've ever been in." That was Andrew's tweet about this. That's not the point. That's the problem. That's the problem. This is a tame blood sports debate. And since, I don't know, how long have we been doing this now? At least an hour ago, we've been like, okay, the conversation's lost. This has all become effectively useless now. And this is a tame version. They go further than this, much further, to the point of them practically tearing each other apart live on camera. And this is supposed to somehow be more useful, better, or this is not bad because those things happen. Just because it could be worse does not mean that anything that's going on here is good. I just have to make that clear.
Yes, I have seen Wilson behave even worse than this. There was one debate that he should have won handily against atheist Matt Dillahunty. And his opening statement was nothing more than a string of personal attacks. And the whole thing, and Matt justifiably walked out, and Andrew declares victory. This is not truth seeking, and I think I'm going to title this video. I don't know what I'm going to title this video, but one of the possible titles could be "Bloodsport is not debate." We're not finding truth here. We're not teaching anybody anything. We're getting internet clout. So it's stupid, it's silly.
Blood sports and bad arguments. That's the name of the video.
Yeah, for truth seeking, it's a waste of time. If you're eating popcorn and enjoying two people fighting, okay, whatever.
was, but you're
Dave,
just
1 second.
kinda-
Here's what we're
Sure.
going to do. Dave can expound here on what he thinks is occurring here in this debate. And then before you come back in, Andrew, we'll give Dave a chance to
Okay.
specifically answer the question that you've asked. So Dave's going to do two things here. He's going to
Ask me the question again. I'm sorry.
Can you justify why two consenting adults who are brother and sister having sex is morally wrong?
Yes.
Then do it.
Okay, because I think it's for the same reason you would think. I think it's against nature. It's evil. It just seems horrible. I don't know. Do you have a better answer for why it's wrong?
Well, yes, divine
Oh, and
command.
three.
Divine command. Okay, fine. So I also say divine command. That's why it's wrong.
Well, but
Oh, four.
Dave is completely disconnected, and he doesn't give a shit about this discussion now. He's a comedian, and he's going to now turn it into jokes.
But
There
then
you go.
the axiom of self-ownership would be wrong.
No,
How did
it
he-
wouldn't. No,
well,
it wouldn't. And if you had listened to me when I
That's
was
so
responding
weird,
the first
though.
time, you would understand.
Well, here,
that.
let me now make my argument back.
Yeah,
If they
right,
don't,
right.
if they don't own themselves, right? Or if they do own
Mhm.
themselves, rather, and they're two consenting adults, just like two homosexuals consenting adults, why is it actually wrong for them to do that? You say because it seems like it's against nature, which isn't the natural fallacy. Couldn't I just apply that to homosexuals as well and say, well, it seems like it's against nature?
Yeah, sure. Maybe you could.
And do you think so? Your moral
Dave's checked
oughts
out.
are based around just things that gross you out?
No, divine intervention, bro.
Divine command?
Dave's
Yeah, there
gone.
you go.
So if it's divine command, then you're going to abandon libertarianism and you're going
No.
to come over to Christian ethics, right?
No.
No. But I thought you made your justification based on divine command.
So, okay, listen, it's clear
Andrew has shit all over the chessboard, and now that Dave's like, I don't really care about playing anymore because there's shit everywhere, Andrew is now going to feel like he won. It's childlike.
it's clear that
Great
Dave-
point, dude. You're right. You have divine command, and you're asking me why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister. Listen, dude. I know, I don't know anything about you. I don't know why Jacob thought this was going to be a good idea. I know you dominate 20-year-old OnlyFans sluts in debates.
I also
But what is your
dominate 45-year-old comedians in debates. What's your point?
41, motherfucker. And listen, and no, you're really not, though. You're asking questions about why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister. Oh, okay. I don't know, because I think it's wrong, and yes, awful. And also, do I think that the government, if we're talking about adults, is it being outlawed going to be a great way to regulate that? Probably not. What even is your vision? I mean, this is the dumbest fucking question to get into what the role of
My
government
eye
ought
is
to be.
twitching.
Yes, you're right. If the FBI
What'd you say?
I said my eye is actually twitching.
I know.
I've only had this happen twice before. It's literally twitching. It's causing me physical distress listening to this. It's really annoying, actually. So I'm
Dave-
sorry if you see me touching my face.
Dave doesn't have an answer, or he does have an answer, and he's so checked out he doesn't care enough to respond with a real answer anymore, which sucks. But Andrew did this. The blame is on Andrew for doing this to this debate.
is breaking in and stopping 25-year-old and 28-year-old brothers and sisters from having sex with each other. That's okay. We
Yeah, but
need
they
the
do
government
that.
to do
Just
that.
so you know, they do that right now. Are you opposed to it? They actually arrest people for doing this, and they drag them off to jail, and they put them
Sure.
in jail for
I'm
doing
not-
that.
I'm not nearly as aware of this as you are, Andrew, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to fight against that law.
Yeah, but
Sure.
here's the thing. Then what I don't understand is that if the argument for self-ownership is that consenting adults can do whatever it is they want to do, because they're consenting adults are not hurting anybody else, this would be a violation of the non-aggression principle. Why couldn't a brother and a sister engage in this in Dave's libertarian land? Why couldn't they? Why shouldn't they be able to? Honestly.
Sure. Well, why shouldn't they do it is for moral reasons. I suppose you could make an argument that if people really do have freedom, then a grown adults who are related should not be banned by law and should not have a cop bash him over the head with a baton for having sex with a cousin or something. Okay, but you're taking this to like this weird extreme example where
That happens now?
Oh, sure. Okay. Anyway, so you're taking this to a weird extreme example where, okay, let's take it to the other extreme and say, do you believe that the government should rush into your house anytime you're doing anything where they determine that that's degenerate or not moral or productive? You're smoking a cigarette right now. Is that enough of a reason for someone to come get you? Like, would there be any realm where you would say, maybe the government shouldn't be regulating every inch of what I determine from divine, whatever that is moral or immoral?
Yeah, so actually this makes my point for me. This is great. So the reason that I just go ahead and concede a lot of these points, because there's no real reason to fight them. For instance, if you agree with me that the only justification that you can have is that, well, because God told you it's gross, and so therefore you ought to not do it, then this would mean that you agree with me in divine command and should be a Christian ethicist. That's why that's done. That's why I just make it super easy for you to go ahead and agree. And you did. You agreed. Absent. So I'm just going to ask this straight out. Okay. And no, I don't believe in that sort of government overreach. And I can give you my systems and reasons for why that is too under Christian ethics, or Christian ethics, where we both take into account consequence, but also take into account duty. So I'm going to ask this: absent any kind of divine command, God didn't tell you anything, would you say that it's not moral? And can you justify why it's not moral for a brother to hump his sister? Could you do that absent divine command? Like, honest question, Dave. This is super important.
Sure. So I would say this, right? I grew up an atheist. Well, I mean, I'm Jewish, but I grew up like not a religious person. It was just, kind of my.
You know what I wonder? I wonder if in the back of Dave's head, he's worried about maybe some of the reasons why he's not engaging on the topic of incest is because he is currently at a point in his career where he is getting on all of the largest media platforms. And if he handles a discussion like this poorly and it goes viral, that all of that might come to an end. I think that's a real risk for him that maybe no one is thinking about except him.
What I was born into. And I was pretty much an atheist for most of my life. And then I had some experiences as I became a young adult that made me think about God and kind of get in touch with him. And then it was really when I had my first child that I really found God. So I would agree with you that yes, there is something from God that instructs me as to what is right and wrong in this world.
Sure.
However, but before I ever believed in God, yeah, there was just a deep feeling inside of me that would have been very wrong. And I do believe that was always from God. So
okay.
I don't know.
Then absent God.
What that proves.
So then absent God.
Nothing in this argument.
Yeah. No, it does though. And I'm going to explain how.
Go
how.
ahead.
Because you're saying that absent God is just your preferences. It's just how you feel.
No,
that's what makes what's moral or not moral.
No,
then what would make it immoral absent God?
Here's the thing, dude. Andrew, I think you're doing a thing here that a lot of like internet blood sport debaters try to do, which is that you're trying to win before you're actually listening to what I'm saying.
I can steel man the entire thing if you'd like.
Try to listen to what I actually said and grapple with that. What I said was not before I believed in God, it was just subjective. What I said was before I believed in God, I always had this feeling, and what I believe is that was always God.
So to steel man,
that's a very different thing than what you said. All right?
Sure. So I'll just steel man the position. The position, to make sure I don't get this wrong at all, is that you believe that there was some type of natural law given to you by God before you ever even believed in God, correct?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Great. So I steel man the position. So to my question, which you didn't actually answer,
sure,
which is this: absent God, if there was no God, could you justify why this would be immoral or not?
Yeah, I don't know that you could. I mean, I think absent God, it's very difficult to arrive at morality.
Right. So absent God, so you're divine command.
Can we stop for just a second?
Oh yeah, we're stopped. We are so stopped right now. We are stopped.
I just want to say, maybe I'm missing something. Someone in the comments, feel free to correct me on this. But I think Andrew just fucked with Dave's head so hard that Dave became a divine command theorist. Like, actually, fully. Like, you can even tell by the way that he reacted to the term divine command theory some 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, however long it was, that he didn't think it was a serious position. And what has Andrew done? Andrew has fisted his cerebellum to the point to where Dave is over here just, yeah, sure. Oh, God, you can't do anything without God. Divine command. Oh, you sold me. I'm same team, bro. Friendly fire. Yeah.
Oh, man. No, like, Andrew's trying to win the debate, and so Dave is trying to win the debate back by just adopting his opponent's moral foundation. And so that's why we've made no progress here. The discussion has not progressed. We are no closer to any kind of truth about anything that we're talking about. And look, I guess the Christian worldview that, I don't want to turn this into a theism stream. Divine command of morality is just as unsubstantiatable as the intuitionist position of I really feel like that should be immoral. Like, we're just arguing things that we can't substantiate. And so both of these people are just sword fighting each other's farts, and that's what's actually going on, and that's why it's frustrating, and that's why we're not getting any... Well, no, we're not getting anywhere because of how they're handling themselves, but even if they were trying to be honest about it, all we would have discovered by this point is that we're both just kind of feeling at each other subjectively really hard. And we still haven't even talked about the foundations for how you come to own something, how ownership comes to be. We haven't got into any of the foundational anythings about any of this, and Dave wasn't really given space to. I'm still giving him grace on this. The libertarian solutions for any of this. A libertarian, even if one thought it was abhorrent behavior to incest or whatever, the libertarian solution to that is covenant communities. If you and a lot of other people really feel strongly about certain acts, then you guys should get together and form a covenant. You should form a community of people that outlaws that, and you all agree that if anyone on any of the property in your community does these things, that X, Y, and Z can be done to those people. And that is a blanket solution for any of this subjectively immoral, victimless crime stuff, because that's what Andrew is specifically questioning him on. These people own themselves. So when they participate in activities that create zero victims, that hurt no one, and all the participants of which are consenting adults with no side effects that hurt any third party, Andrew, because God told him so, thinks that some people need to be violently controlled on pain of death from doing these things that create no victims and hurt no one. And the libertarian answer to that is, Andrew, okay, find other people that agree with you on that weird stuff. I'm certainly not going to join any community that allows people like you to violently control people like that. But, if you have a lot of your friends that want to go live like that, go buy some property next to each other, form a community, and consensually agree to enforce those rules on all of the property that you guys own. Fine. That's acceptable in a libertarian ethic. And actually, and even more importantly, libertarianism is the only, the only way you could get that. Because in any other system, it's not going to be permanent. Even if you're able to establish it, let's say you get a monarchy where you get to make all the rules. Good luck maintaining that monarchy. In the past, across history, when those kinds of rules are starting to be created and the populace becomes oppressed, people tend to get stabbed and eliminated, and tyrants tend to get dealt with. But in a libertarian society where you have sovereignty over your property and you can make all the rules that you want in your community with people that consent to the same rules, that can go on in perpetuity. You can have only under libertarianism can you have the bigotry that all of your God-given heart desires. Like, and that's about as real as I can be. Like, you want to control peaceful people not creating victims? Well, libertarianism is the only ideology that allows you to do that on your property. Everybody else is going to control you. Every democracy, eventually you're going to get outvoted, and it's going to turn into the liberalism that every single democratic country turns into. Every single democracy liberalizes. That's just how it works. The general public eventually, over time, votes to liberalize things, to allow things that you consider abhorrent and degenerate. So democracy is not your bag. Republics, not your bag. They're not going to give you what you want. Libertarians will, though. The only concession you have to make, Andrew, is to let other people make their rules for their property. You can do whatever stupid, retrobate, fascistic crap you want on your property, but you also have to let other people make rules for their property. You don't get to control everyone like a little like a little micro tyrant.
As well,
That was an ad hoc,
theorist,
Patrick.
just like
That was
myself.
bad.
It was a slip of the tongue.
So if that's true, and you're a divine command theorist, and we have now shown how self-ownership leads to absurd conclusions like a brother being able to hump their sister.
No, but I disagree with it. Okay.
Well, okay, why can't, if you own yourself, why can't you hump your sister if she owns herself, Dave? That makes no sense.
Andrew's right.
What do you mean by why can't you? Why can't, if you don't own yourself, why can't you hump your sister? What does that mean?
Good question. That's my point is with the non-aggression principle, the entire axiom.
You're not asking anything, dude.
Yeah,
okay,
I am.
So let's just say this. And man, I wish you had picked an example that wasn't so fucking uncomfortable to talk about. But here, you, Andrew, don't own yourself. Mm-hmm. Why can't you just hump your sister?
You could.
Exactly. So what the hell are you asking? What's the question?
But that goes to my point. I think that if you actually have self-ownership as something more than an axiom, meaning it's justified somehow that you actually do own yourself, it's not just a social construction, then you wouldn't be able to hump your sister if you did not own yourself, right?
What do you mean wouldn't be
but if
able
you do,
to?
But if you do own yourself, you can still hump your sister. The point being,
Andrew, do you own yourself?
Under the current paradigm of the social construction, we would say yes.
Okay, but so if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to hump your. I don't get.
No, you still could, but that is the point.
So that's it. So you still could. So what are you saying?
So let me try again. Just listen to what I'm saying, like I just did yours. In fact, maybe you can steel man this for me.
Okay,
maybe like I just did for you.
Let me listen, and I'll see if I can.
So my point is that self-ownership is why you should not be allowed to aggress against another person because they own themselves. Correct?
Okay.
Is that correct? Isn't that the basis of the NAP? You own you, I own me. That's why we cannot aggress against each other, correct?
Sure.
Okay, got it. And yet here we're both talking about using state authority to aggress against people who own themselves, who aren't actually doing anything you can justify as being wrong outside of Christian ethics. And so the thing is that seems to dispel the NAP. Now, can you steelman that back to me?
Okay,
I know.
So you're saying that if we own ourselves and everybody and an act of aggression would be violating someone else's self-ownership, then it wouldn't be an act of aggression to what? Kill yourself, incest amongst adults, things like that.
Right.
Okay. So I'm still
if that's true.
I'll slow it back down if I don't want it to become comical, but we have a long way to go, so I want to keep the stream going.
And the only moral oughts that we have for why you shouldn't do this is through Christianity.
No, I didn't say. No, by the way, I didn't say Christianity, but you said that. But
okay, fine. God, whatever the justified axiom is for God, for divine command. Okay,
sure.
If that's the only way that we can justify that this is immoral, then
Dave's
the
still
idea that
memeing.
you owning
He
yourself
doesn't care. He's still
and
checked
two
out.
consenting adults owning themselves in anarcho-capitalist land can't be true, because you are willing to use and violate their self-ownership with aggression because you think they're doing something morally wrong, but you can't justify what they're doing that's morally wrong.
No, okay. So again, this is back what I was trying to say before, that I think there's these two things that need to be separated. So there's the moral application of the initiation of violence, and then there's morality. And they're not exactly the same thing. And so if my neighbor, let's just say, my neighbor is not being a good husband and being a good father. Okay, so like let's say he's just very cold with his children.
I'm turning it back down.
And,
It's distracting.
like doesn't pay the bills on time and doesn't work and is lazy and does all types of things that I judge to be morally wrong. Like I think he should be a better father and a better husband. But if I go over there and beat him over the head with a club to make him be a better husband and father, it's not as simple an equation as, was he morally right or wrong? The question is it morally justified for me to enact this force against him in order to make, like, is that more moral or immoral than his initial sin? So that's the question that you get into when you start talking about government regulating a lot of these things. It's not as simple as you're making it out that, well, if people own themselves, then it has to be morally justified, whatever they do.
It actually is that simple. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just have to jump in and say that, like, this splitting that Dave is doing of, like, oh, what are you, like, justified stopping somebody from doing against, and, like, what's moral? I think this is a massive error that people make when they talk about moral reasoning. I personally don't like this preference-based morals, and then we have, like, oh, but, like, what's the real ethics? What are the things that you're, like, justified in stopping somebody from doing? I think these are senseless categories because one of them just winds up mattering and the other one just winds up being another name for the ick. It's like, which one? These are the things that I have the ick for, and then these are the things that I have, like, a justification as for why I think someone should or should not be allowed to do them. One of these categories I don't give a shit about. Like, I don't care. Don't tell me about that. No one should care. What, in my opinion, maybe some people would say otherwise. No one should care what you have in this ick camp over here. But by placing the name moral on it, because you have some feeling inside that says, "Ooh, I think they ought to be doing this or ought not be doing that," you're conflating ethics and morality, which is important and people should care about, with your ick. Stop doing that. It's not helpful. And I think if the conversation were going in a more productive direction, this could be something that could be a talking point in itself. Because I think Andrew might actually have something to say about this. Because he is someone who holds a very high standard for what counts as moral. But we're never going to get there. So I felt like I needed to jump in and say something about it now.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I mirror those sentiments exactly. When I talk about morality, good and evil, I talk strictly only about that which force and coercion can be used to prevent or to make restitution for. Everything else outside of that, I call aesthetic. And what I mean by that is opinion and feeling. And like you said, the ick. Why is that the way I define things? For exactly the reason you just said, and I won't repeat it. But I definitely, I mean, I'll have conversations with people about it, but those conversations to me mean as much about conversations about which Metallica album was the best. It's just subjective preference. We don't have to agree at all, even, to really even be friends about a lot of this stuff. There's some aesthetic things that I might not be friends. Like, I probably would be very reluctant to be friends with, like, an active prostitute or people that did a lot of drugs. Like, that's an aesthetic thing. Can I use force and coercion to control them physically on pain of violence to make them behave how I would want them to? Absolutely not. That's worth debating over. So I guess what I'm trying to say is mostly what Christian said, with the caveat of, like, we can have our aesthetic preferences, and that's different. And I wish people would stop weakening the importance of the word morality by just making it include the icks. Well said, Christian.
Okay, so let's see if we can't parse this out. And again, I'll see if I can't just steelman this with my criticism. So the thing is that I agree. We can look at scales, right? We can say that we can get to absurd conclusions if we were to say that there's no time or place to apply some sort of like aggression towards somebody, right? Otherwise, you would aggress on them for anything that you consider some kind of moral failure. And obviously, that's not what either of us are after. Sure. What I'm saying is that if we take it to its logical conclusion, libertarianism, which is what I said in my opening, as a consequence of itself, has to actually lead to degeneracy. And the reason is because of the idea here is that I own me and you own you. And if we consent to the two things we do together and it hurts nobody else, therefore not violating the non-aggression principle, which is the foundation for which this thing, revolves.
I think we're about done.
Then how can you make ever a claim against homosexuals getting married or against incest or against any of these things? How can you possibly make that claim? That's the ultimate question.
Okay, so
let's hear Dave's response to this, but we have never left Andrew's introduction because of Andrew's tactics. He just reiterated 45 minutes into this thing exactly where he tried to begin. So I say, Christian, we listen to Dave's response, then we say our piece about foundational morality for libertarian ends, and then maybe we jump to that listener question that they did and then call it. Unless you think, or maybe you have in your notes something else that they get to after this that's important.
No, I think it's time that we start repairing some of the damage.
A couple things here. I don't think that's the ultimate question, and I do think that I could make the claim against that in the same way that you could. And I think we already established this, right? That we can both make the claim for the exact same reasons, because we believe in God and we believe in morality and we believe that this is immoral. So we both have the exact same ability to make the claim. But if we're talking about what your more, I think, broader point that you made there, that libertarianism leads to immorality, I think is completely wrong. And I think this is like kind of the most important fundamental miscalculation that a lot of people on the right who reject libertarianism make. The idea that, well, freedom and liberty is really what leads to degeneracy. And that's just not true. And in fact, empirically and logically, we can look at the situation, particularly the situation of the United States of America, and go, look, as the government has grown bigger and bigger, you've seen degeneracy get more and more out of control. And I understand why there is a movement against degeneracy. I understand we live in a moment right now where I think our society is essentially disintegrating. And I think that that's one of the things that, Andrew, you kind of are, I don't know, prominent for pointing out. The disintegration of values and norms all throughout.
But the reason I believe that those values and norms are...
You can't let the man build a bridge. Third attempt, kick him in the dick again. Just shut up, man. Just shut up and let Dave talk. He's trying to compliment you.
Dave's face. Yeah, right on Dave's face. He's like, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to diffuse some of this tension. And Andrew just is not letting it happen. And that really just, I mean, that sums up from the debate aspect of it, that encapsulates the entirety of what this is. It's continuously rising tensions. Every effort to divert this crazy train that we've been on gets profusely kicked right in the pelvis. And it's a shame. It's a shame for a lot of reasons, but particularly on the behavior of Andrew in this case, because again, like you were talking about with the other debate that he most likely could have handedly won if he had gone in differently, Andrew completely bodied Dave where it mattered, in my opinion here. Like, we've been clear on this. don't like hate Dave for any particular reason. I vehemently agree with him more on most things than I do Andrew from my awareness of Andrew's positions. That doesn't matter. Dave was not here to bat for liberty. He was not on his best game, in his best form in this debate. And it's precisely because of the way that he was thrown into a highly contentious, acidic, toxic, almost, I know that's kind of a strange word these days, but corrosive environment that he wasn't prepared for and was pounded in the face repeatedly in a manner to where he was never able to reorient himself in this conversation. And so he reached out and grabbed onto the first branches to try to slow his fall. I don't think this is not Dave Smith is an idiot. Wow, look at him. He can't say anything about libertarianism ever. It's an unfortunately poor performance in my opinion, but it's because of the environment that he was put in. If Andrew was interested in hearing the best from Dave, he could have done so much more in order to get that out of him.
And we're not going to watch it because we'd have to stick around for another 35, 40 minutes to get to that part. But at some point when the debate is kind of over and they're about to move into viewer questions, Andrew basically says, okay, well, now that the debate's over, I'm going to be a nice guy. It's like, this is manipulative. This is like sociopathic almost, where when you're in debate mode, you're just an overbearing prick to prevent any truth from being arrived at or sought or progressed towards. And then afterwards, you expect people to just change modes with you and go back to being friendly buddy. What is that? That's just weird. Like, why are you treating people like this? And I can hear a justification that they would put forward, and it would be something along the lines of, well, debates aren't about convincing the other person you're debating with. Debates are about convincing the audience, and a great way, an effective way to convince the audience is all these tactics. No! All you're doing is convincing idiots that don't know how to look for the debate tactics into thinking that you won and are right. It's a false win. You might be convincing people that you won and that you're right, but you're convincing them for vapid, nonsensical reasons, non-reasoned reasons. And if you want to convince people for reasoned reasons, you would just assume try to convince your interlocutor. I'm repeating myself. Okay, so I just wanted to address what I think that they would say. Like, they're trying to convince the audience, and there's rhetorical tricks that you can use to convince the audience. Okay, yeah, but you're going to convince them for false reasons, not for rational ones. Okay.
Getting someone to agree with you is not, that's not it. That's not it. We talked about this in the last video that we had. Right. You can agree or disagree with somebody or hold a correct or incorrect position. It's, in my opinion, just as, if not more important, that you hold it for the right reasons. And if your reason, let's just grant it, that Andrew's right about everything, that he actually was the one with the correct position here, and he just made himself look like such a tool that it's difficult for me to see the cogency of his arguments right now. That even if it was the case, going in and someone leaving this debate and saying, wow, he pwned David Smith, I believe what Andrew believes now. That is a terrible reason. Terrible reason. But that is the only thing you can say is doing the convincing. Oh my God, Dave Smith got so pwned by Andrew over here. Wow, he annihilated him. Wow, Andrew's so smart. I believe everything he says now. What is that? Is that's your convincing? That's what convincing people looks like? Man, I can't wait until they find the next person who crushes you in a debate. God, they'll just all flock. They'll leave you in droves. There's no reason for them to stick around with you. As soon as you get crushed into the dirt, you realize they're either a sycophant who will just believe everything that comes out of your mouth. God forbid, that sounds like a miserable position to be in. Or they're going to leave you as soon as you flop a debate. Beautiful, beautiful place you put yourself in.
Okay, so let's actually say some of the things that I wish Dave had said. And Dave, open invitation. We can have a private or public conversation about any of the epistemological foundations of libertarian morality. Christian is a co-author of mine on what I consider a pretty freaking important document called the Anti-Subjectivist Manifesto. It lays out what attempts to be the least subjective moral philosophy that arrives at libertarian ends of respect for consent and property. So, Andrew, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, I would go a step further than that. And I would say it is the least subjective moral philosophy, period. It just so happens to land in a position that aligns with libertarian ends. It's, that I think is like a really huge point of this. And if it was the case that after this argument that we give you, that it turns out that actually communism is the best world philosophy, I would be here preaching communism right now. It's not that it's a libertarian philosophy that I care about. It's because it is the least arbitrary moral philosophy, and it is also a libertarian philosophy.
All right, I'm going to have to remove Christian from the stream now.
I mean, tell me, if the argument was sound,
I'm kidding.
We would be compelled by the force of reason.
By the force of reason! Yes, I love that saying.
This stream right here, this whole debate that we just watched, is why we critique folks like Rothbard. We don't hate Dave. We don't hate Andrew. We don't hate Rothbard. We don't hate Hoppe. We don't hate Spooner. We don't hate any of these people. What we want is for libertarians to be out there on their best foot. It's why we wrote the Anti-Subjectivist Manifesto. It's why we preach it as a doctrine. It's not because we want you to follow our own special little thing. It's because it's soul crushing almost as someone who believes that this is a really important thing that we're doing here and that we're advocating for, that people don't have the arguments they need to support it. So every time you see a video from us, maybe you just watched the Spooner video that we put out and you were like, man, these guys are just bashing Spooner. He's a cool dude. We completely agree. Spooner's a great guy. But what you get when you get Spooner is you get arguments that don't justify your commitments to libertarian principles. You get this progression that Dave went through of this kind of Humerian intuitionism and Hoppian argumentation ethics that moves into, okay, well, maybe it is all just a social construct. So who cares, right? It's all subjective. And we can into, oh, I guess maybe it is God. I don't know. Please stop. Don't. You get pushed into these corners where you wind up digging yourself into holes that you either A, don't believe, which I think genuinely, and I'm saying this in his favor, I think Dave said some things in this debate that he doesn't actually believe as a way of trying to navigate his way through the conversation. That's fine. It happens. But if we're better equipped with stronger arguments from the get-go, like in anti-subjectivism, at least as I believe it right now, you won't find yourself in these kinds of positions because you'll have the foundation that you need to tackle these sorts of questions head on.
We've done Rothbard's conception of natural law being based on the nature of man, the subjectivity there. Andrew would have tore Dave up if he had gone with Rothbard's natural law. I don't even know what... If he'd have done Passio's natural law, it would have just been a bunch of assertions. I'm sure Andrew would have had a field day with that. Same with Spooner. We're critiquing this stuff to strengthen the libertarian argument, to give Dave what he needed for this debate. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the work that we've done. And I would love to chat with Dave privately or publicly to walk him through this stuff and to give him a better foundation so that next time some dick comes along asking him to justify how he owns himself, he would have a solid, straightforward response. Either you agree that I own myself, or you're signaling to me in no uncertain terms that I should watch out for you as a beast that might try and attack me to get me to behave how they want me to. Are you a beast or are you a human? Which one do you want to be? It's the excluded middle. That was a joke. That was a joke. Okay, so Andrew tees up this question in the very beginning that literally went unanswered the entire time, and let's answer it. How do you, Dave Smith, justify your self-ownership? Was the question. The answer, and Andrew says, ownership is a social construct. You only own things because everyone agrees that you can own things. The answer is kind of that, but kind of not. His conception of a social construct is collectivist in nature, meaning if 51% of everyone agrees that something works a certain way, that's how it should work. So if he can get 51% of people to become sort of Christian fundamentalists and believe that gay people are wrong, or skittle people, or whatever he said, that becomes the social ought. So if he can get 51% of people to say that Skittles people have no private property rights, and you can go into their homes and throw them in a cage on pain of death for what's the fancy word for but
sodomy.
Thank you. First, people can throw someone in a cage and ignore their property rights and cage them for sodomy. And if 51% of people agree, then, well, property is socially constructed, so that becomes how property works for Andrew. The correct conception of property is not a collectivized thing. It is a relationship between two people. And we talk about this in the Anti-Subjectivist Manifesto, which is like a 10-page document, guys. This is not like a 300-page compendium that you have to invest a month of your life in. And we need to write more on it and flesh it out and make a 300-page compendium. But anyway, it's a one-to-one relationship. Ethics functions between individuals exclusively. And so you have two people, and they both agree to respect each other's consent and property. So between those two people, consent exists, and property exists in a pragmatic, efficacious way. I agree to respect your property. I won't rob from you or damage your stuff. And in exchange, I demand that you afford me the same respect. And in so doing, we have created property between us. And we go through life and we find good people that also want to reciprocate respect for these concepts between us. And we surround ourselves with good people for this reason, because it's protective and because it grants us rights. Rights come from these reciprocal agreements between people. If you don't have agreements with the people around you, your rights are as good as non-existent. What was the quote from the last video? I think, man, I'm going to really use this one all the time now. Be they one thing or another, these natural rights have either enabled such tyranny as we have seen, or they've been powerless to prevent it. And all that is just to say that unless the people involved, the individuals involved in these agreements, aren't actively choosing to hold these concepts in their head and restrict their behavior according to them, that these things called rights are as good as non-existent. So you may have a superstition in your head that, rights are woven into the fabric of reality, or rights come from God, or rights come from some objective source. Yeah. You may have a conception of where you think rights come from, but sort of in reality, in practice, if the people involved don't actually choose to act like these concepts are in play and in practice, they're as good as non-existent. They're as good as spooks. So the answer to Andrew, from me, and Christian can have his say in it next, is property a social construct? Yes, but between individuals, not between collectives, and it's not a democratic whatever. That's commie crap. It's a social construct between individuals. And I don't say social construct because I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be so turned off by that particular phrase. It's used in some other areas I don't like, but we can say a constructivist rights or constructivist rights approach, meaning that we have to agree on things and we have to actually reciprocate behavior and restrictions on our behavior between individuals for these concepts to exist. And so that's where property comes from. And if the last point I'll make in response to Andrew is that, like, look, if Andrew clearly doesn't reciprocate respect for consent and property with me, Andrew thinks that he has the right to initiate force to control me in a laundry list of ways because some voice in his head or whatever complicated, whatever he gets divine messages from his God, he thinks he is justified in not reciprocating rights with me. What does that do to our relationship, our one-on-one relationship? All that means to me is that Andrew is in some ways a dangerous beast. And I don't have to respect the rights of dangerous beasts that don't care about reciprocating respect for my consent and property. If he wants to drag us back down into the state of nature where we each have to use force to either be left alone or to control others, then he's dragged us down into that realm, and force it will be. Christian, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I really want to push on this last point really hard, because I think this is, and I'll spare the full breadth of the argument so that people can go read or listen to the Anti-Subjectivist Manifesto themselves. But what I personally, on reflecting, you know, especially after having some time away from actually have written it, appreciate the most about the work is its recognition of the idea that you have the option to engage with people consensually or not morally in any way, shape, or form. It's not that we have a moral disagreement if we don't engage with other people consensually. It's not that we're using a different ethics. It's you engage with other people consensually and ethically, or you are leaving the realm of ethics behind entirely. You are embracing the realm of you are embracing the state of nature. You are embracing might makes right. And so shadow boxing with Andrew here, of course, he would say, well, I disagree. I don't think consent is all that important, so I'm just going to take your things. What's stopping me from doing that, right? Sure, there may not be a constitution that jumps out of the sky and zaps you with lightning, or there's not going to, God's foot isn't going to come down and squish you if you try to take my wallet or anything like that. But you deny yourself through just sheer entailments and application of reason any possibility of you claiming that your actions were moral. Sure. Now, if he's fine with that, if he says, sure, I don't care if my actions are moral, I just want to be a monster who just, you know, denies any moral anything's going on here, then fine. He can be that. He can be the state of nature being. People do it all the time, every day, all over. But I think he's somebody, or anybody else who would be in his position, not to seem like I'm picking on him particularly too much, anybody else in his position holds their view because they think these things are important. And so I think there's a lot of power behind recognizing that you either engage with others consensually or you deny yourself the realm of ethics through force of reason alone. There's no trick going on here. This is just how it maths out. That to me that's telling. And it's something that I've yet to see a good counter to, other than just denying the possibility in the first place. Oh, that can't be the case because my God's real, or because natural law, or something like that. No one has addressed that argument at the level of the argument. So I'll leave it there. I think that's a really important facet that needs to be considered when we're having these kinds of conversations. The scope of morality is clearly delineated around consensual engagement with other people.
And from consent flows property. You can't have property without consent, and consent is almost meaningless without property. These concepts are very closely paired at the hip. And there's another 30-minute diatribe or discussion. Let's be charitable to myself, at least. There's another discussion to be had around linking one's morality and what you can coerce people around you for to a notion of what a God communicates to you is good. I don't want to get into that too much right now, but when I see people that just defer their critical thought around what they can coerce me for to an entity they can't even show me a picture of, that's worrisome, because who knows what their God is going to tell them it's okay for them to attack me over tomorrow. If someone asks me, I can tell you my universalizable, unchanging standards for consent and property and how I interact with people. And my answer is not going to be based on a deference of agency to an entity. Well, I don't want to turn this into a theistic stream, but I wanted to say that much. which is just opening a giant can of worms and then walking away. So I apologize for doing that. That's my bad.
At some point, we may have to turn to the topic in a dedicated video.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Do you want to go to the one question, or do you think we covered it? What do you think?
No, I think we addressed it already. I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen the Twitter discourse around it. There's been no shortage of people. I mean, we have the libertarian chairperson. We have every multi-hair colored cartoon avatar using person with a libertarian handle on Twitter, throwing some thoughts into this, and usually in their defense, usually they're correctly recognizing that Andrew was a huge dick to Dave. But I also think Dave did himself absolutely no favors in grabbing onto what was effectively a lifeline from Andrew in belief in God, and then trying to run with that as a justification because he wasn't prepared to give what I'm sure he knows are better answers to the questions that Andrew levied against him. I'm not going to, we could go through the clip. It would just be beating a dead horse at this point. I blame Dave as far as I think he could have prepared better for this, and that it is not the representation of libertarianism that I would have liked to have seen here. But again, I fully thrust the state of the conversation at the feet of Andrew. It could have been handled so much better.
Yeah. So if you wanted to have a truth-seeking engagement with somebody around this topic, what you do behind the scenes is like, hey, I would like to invite you onto my show, and I do this. This is what I do. So I'm not just making this up and holding other people to standards that I don't hold myself to. I say, hey, I disagree with you on the foundation for self-ownership, and I would like to engage with you on it to see if I'm wrong. Here is my position. I don't see a and I'm pretending to be Andrew here, okay? This is not me. I don't see a justification for self-ownership, and you, as a libertarian that believes in the non-aggression principle, clearly do. But I've never heard anybody successfully substantiate self-ownership, and without self-ownership, the non-aggression principle falls apart. This is all in a message to him before we even get anywhere near the day of the show. I want him to know the line of questioning I'm going to begin. Why? Well, it might make it harder for me to win the debate, but you know what it'll do? It might give Dave the chance to prepare some kind of response. Who knows? I might learn I'm wrong this way. And who knows? The audience might actually learn some truth this way. And we might actually have a productive discussion. That's what you do if you're serious about truth instead of clout. And I'm not going to, I mean, I'm just saying the same thing that I've said before. I really wish people would heap upon clout farmers the disdain that they deserve more often. So,
yeah. And I'll just say one final nice thing again, just to make sure it's clear. I don't hate anybody that we've seen on here. I have no, other than I think this was not a good showing of them and maybe reflective in some places of other aspects of their character. I don't hold like hate in my heart for Andrew, or I'm not like, you know, gonna go to bed thinking about how mad I am at Dave or anything like that. But just to make sure we even out both sides of this sandwich that we've made here, Andrew had really well thought through lines of argumentation that he was going to follow in order to try to really push Dave on his positions. And if this had been a more civil discussion wherein he allowed Dave to try to work through these things, and Dave, let's just say the same thing that happened before, he gets Dave to effectively fold into his own position. I mean, holy crap, this would be an entirely different stream. We'd be doing purely Dave damage control on how he just like absolutely completely fumbled the ball to this like super strong debater in Andrew. But that's not what we get to do, unfortunately. It could have been. I honestly would have preferred that stream, to be completely honest with you. But here we are. I'll drop the dad voice. If you're this far, you already know and you don't care. So
I'll be genuine. I am not interested in engaging with Andrew. I find him to be bad faith. I have yet to see him perform in a way that I'm like, that was good. I came away from that discussion with more truth than I left. I'm fine saying that. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you're still here, thanks for watching. If you enjoy this content and appreciate the rigor we try and bring in the detailed way that we do, consider supporting the channel. There's links in the description for supporters. Supporters get access to custom, secret, exclusive, behind-the-scenes live stream. This right now, as we're talking, when you guys see it, is going to be probably a week later after it's edited and cleaned up and polished and put out. But the supporters are watching right now, and we're seeing their chat. And if you want to be a supporter, that can be you too. You'll get access to these behind-the-scenes things. Also, we have an excellent, super secret, ultra encrypted server on a program called Polynom, which is kind of like Discord, except much more private and self-hosted, and we have a lot of fun there, a lot of good people. Come join us, hang out. And then the last thing I always say is if you disagree with anything that we've said, please don't just sit there silently to yourself or worse, keyboard pound into YouTube comments that YouTube is probably going to hide from me anyway. Join our Discord server or our Polynom server and message us and say, hey, I think you're wrong here, and here's why, respectfully. And guess what? I have never not done thus far is invite the people that do that to either have private voice conversations or I bring them on the show and we talk through it for everyone to benefit. So if you disagree, please don't just disappear. Please come and engage with us and chat. Christian, last word?
Yeah, the Polynom server has 25 segmented meme pages that have been meticulously categorized in the most optimal format so that no matter what your flavor of meme is, you can always find one that's right up to your liking. So if you come and join us over there, you'll have that beautiful... I've been a big fan of the grimdark memes from the 41st millennium, one of my favorites. So
I put a libertarian one in there today. Did you see it?
I have not yet.
Hold on. I got to show this off. I'm proud of it. All right. You know what? And this is something that I thought about doing a show on. The dude that drove the up-armored backhoe around and destroyed government buildings. Who am I talking about? You know.
Yeah, Killdozer.
Killdozer. Thank you. All right, hold on. Let me show off. Oh, it's a WebP, and my app doesn't show WebP files. So, never mind. So, join our Polynom server, and you can see this meme that I'm alluding to. Yeah, there you go. Because nothing supports WebP these days. All right. Guys, thanks for watching. Supporters, thanks for hanging out. Good to see you chat in the comments. Christian, thanks for joining me. I always enjoy our conversations. With that, we will bounce. Peace, love, and anarchy.
Be simple for you.